Chapter 1, The Banality of Life. A stranger. These are the words that echoed in the mind of a young boy as he glanced into a pond of tranquil water. The bright blue sky reflected off as the young visage of a 7-year-old child could be seen. A few ripples echoed through the water as some fish swam through, breaking the boy's concentration. A heavy sigh escaped his mouth, unbefitting of his age. No matter how many times I see it, it's all so different, the childish voice broke out. But this is reality. It was quite odd to see such a focused gaze coming from a child, but it wasn't odd considering the mind of said child. His name was Damien. He had distinct hair, messy, raven black hair with red streaks decorating the left side of his head. His red pupils, though seemingly unnatural from his previous life, were not overly uncommon where he currently was. He wore a simple black tunic that seemed rather dirty, spots of mud and dried ounces of blood were apparent. The one-piece world, he sighed. Should I be thankful that I get another shot at life, but this world is so messed up. It wasn't hard for Damien to recognize the world, the villagers nearby gave enough information to connect the dots. The one-piece world was exceedingly vibrant, just about anything could be found there. From superpowers such as turning into animals, elements, and just about anything that could be imagined. Exotic plants and animals roamed the lands, a truly beautiful world. But behind the beautiful curtain was a world filled with corruption, death, maladies, and disasters. The ones who preached justice could be seen through many lights. Though they maintained the balance of the world, the dark hands hidden behind the curtains were soaked with innocent blood. Nations coming together under the banner of the world government. Mortals were idolized as gods ruled from above. All the while the indomitable marines of the Navy headquarters acted as their face and greatest sword and shield. The pirates that roamed the seas committed great tragedies whilst the innocent were the true victims. Forgotten truths, a vast web of conspiracies and tumultuous seas filled the world. Never did Damien think that one day he would be thrown into this messy world. Kids who have never seen peace and kids who have never seen war have different values. Those who stand at the top determine what's wrong and what's right. These words echoed in the boy's mind as he recalled the blonde-haired psycho who preached them in his previous life. It was considered quite an incredible moment in the anime, but having reached such a world, it was a whole new reality. Thump! A blue-feathered bird suddenly landed on a tree nearby as many leaves rained down. Damien shook his head, his mind was filled with too many thoughts. He didn't have a good experience in his previous life. All was well, he was an average child in a family of 4, parents, himself and a younger sister. If there was one word Damien could describe himself with, it would either be resilient or unlucky. Early passing of his parents to surviving a tough childhood and the eventual loss of his sister by illness. Being born with an exceptionally strong memory went from being a gift to a curse. Yet finding strength in his profound grief, drawing strength through the enduring memories of his family. Powering through school and university, running off the renewed determination to honor his dead parents and sister. Yet it was all for naught as Damien's story came to a close at the age of 18 at the hands of a drunk driver. An odd occurrence persisted as the boy was lost in thought. Flutter. The grass around his feet seemed to shiver and dance around where he stood, the flowers by the tree looked as if they were singing. Damien was used to it, he attributed it to another phenomenon of this fantasy world. It wouldn't be the first thing that surprised him here. The child then walked down the grassy fields and entered a large cabin that sat at the edge of the cliff in the small village he resided in. Creak. The olden door gave out a sorrowful groan as the hinges cried out from the abuse of being used for decades. Mom, he sighed. You shouldn't move around in your condition. The boy looked at the woman who was rummaging through the aged kitchenware, seemingly unaware of her sickness. She seemed to be in her early 20s with long white hair and a slender body. Equipped with a rather radiant smile. Her image, in discord. Don't worry about me, Damien-chan, go wash your hands, breakfast is almost ready. The young mother gave a sweet smile, though, in the eyes of the boy, he only saw her hidden pain. She's gotten worse, he thought. His mother, Nadia, was the one who had taken care of him for the past 7 years. Most children wouldn't recall their early years, and yet Damien was fully conscious of everything since birth, his impressive memory carried over. The one thing he's noticed over the past 7 years, his mother was a devil fruit ability user. She never talked about it much but it's not hard to notice. Weakness to the sea and still water, in general, was quite loud. She also had some sort of illness that dragged her down quite a bit but her heart somehow always found the will to keep going. Nadia gave her usual optimistic smile and dragged Damien to the table, clapping her hands and announcing, "Let's eat." It wasn't an overly filling meal, mostly plants and vegetables with little meat, but it was enough. The conundrum Damien faced was that of reality itself. What to do? There are schools and learning institutions in this world but it wasn't the recipe everyone here went by. You didn't need a college diploma to succeed amongst your peers, nor did you need to attend school itself. Most kids were taught at home by their parents, getting small jobs in the village. Though it was one piece, not every casual soul who had transmigrated over wanted to become an admiral, or a great pirate of the seas or dream of having a harem. Reality and fantasy were two different things until one got plunged into a place where the fantasy was the reality. Damien just wanted to live in a relatively comfortable home with his caring parent, a feeling that was robbed of him in his previous life. The unfortunate reality was that the world was teeming with horrors, from giant sea monsters to crazy pirates, to disastrous weathers and corrupt governments. A few hours passed as Damien went outside, to fetch some water from the well. Though he was only 7, his body was unnaturally tough and resilient. Nadia said that he got it from his father. "Good morning, Damien. Diligent as always. I wish my son would be as hard-working as you." The friendly villagers waved toward the boy as he carried 4 buckets down the road. Small wooden houses decorated the side of the road, small shops around every corner. Chirp! Birds flew on above as the sun's warm rays bathed the village in its warmth. It was a rather poor village, but not poor in its vibrance. A warmth that was robbed from Damien in his previous life. The village was not large and had around 1,600 inhabitants. It was built on a small island in the West Blue by the name of Renaissance Island. A forested landmass with lakes circling the main residence area. A nearby island of Greta housed a marine base, the 111th branch of the West Blue. Their existence warded off anyone with malice. Renaissance was a poor island, but it had happy and genuine people, something worth more than what money could buy. Renaissance Island image, in Discord. Thunk. The 4 empty buckets slammed onto the ground next to the well at the core of the village. The stone slabs that lined its walls were cracked and overgrown with moss. "Damn," he murmured. "Almost empty." It was a hot summertime, the well had begun to dry up, and the reservoir beneath was almost gone. The young boy attached the bucket to the rope as it was lowered in. Within moments, the water filled it to the brim. Damien did the same with the second bucket, third and fourth as it took a decent while. Tch. A bright ray of sunlight reflected off the clear water and into Damien's eyes, causing an annoyed groan. His eyes darted to the side, glancing at a tree that blocked the sunlight. A sigh escaped Damien's lips as he picked up the buckets with ease. That fruit! It was quite interesting. The tree he was looking at was a rather giant apple tree, though it had quite the impostor amongst the fruits. The fruit had the body of an apple, though with a vibrant look. Instead of a uniform red, the fruit sported black lines running down the stem to the bottom and swirls throughout. Without a doubt, a devil fruit. Fruit image, in Discord. Though Damien had seen it there for 7 years now, he didn't eat it, nor did he have the desire to. A devil fruit was a lottery, a gamble. Zoan, Paramecia, or Logia. Though he could be lucky and get some incredible fruit, he could also be equally as unlucky and get something trashy. And there are many trash fruits. Such as the jacket fruit, turning into a jacket to be worn by others. Just the thought sent shivers down Damien's back. Considering my luck, my curiosity really isn't worth it, Damien resolutely told himself. It's probably something like the turd fruit. Cough. It is our saving grace, young Damien, an aged voice called out from behind, making his existence known. He turned around to see the 82-year-old village chief, Narahi. Long white hair, sucking on a pipe. "It has been here for decades, protecting us with its divine grace," Narahi voiced out as he gestured to the fruit with a nod. Damien rolled his eyes. Devil fruits, though rather common in the Grand Line, were seen as myths and legends in many of the 4 outer seas, Renaissance Island included. The fruit never rots over so many years, through the coldest of winters and the hottest of summers. Truly a miracle, the old man cried out. Narahi looked at Damien with an elderly smile. "You too are a miracle. Your mother was practically drained of life when she had you. We even invited a doctor from Greta Island who said the baby would be born dead, a stillbirth. What a tragic announcement." He placed his hand on the boy's head. "It's a miracle that you were born so strong, weighing nearly 6 kilograms, my. Damien squinted his eyes while the old geezer continued his senile comments. "A healthy woman is said to give birth to a dead baby. The baby is born exceedingly healthy, but the mother is left ill. Why?" Damien never asked this question out loud as he knew his mother would chide him to death. He bid farewell to the old man, walking back home. Not paying attention to the nearby trees as they swayed joyfully, and the grass that surrounded them danced about. Night crept in from the windows left ajar. The dishes had been cleaned from a usual dinner. A soft wind blew through the home occasionally. Nadia and Damien sat on a swinging bench outside, each swing sending out loud creaks from the old contraption. It was a miracle it hadn't fallen apart yet. The boy leaned his head on his mother's shoulder as they watched the sunset. Though the height difference was almost void. At the age of 7, Damien stood at exactly 5 feet tall, 1.52 m. In contrast to his mother at 5 feet 3 inches 1.6 meters. A/N, I use imperial for heights and metric for the rest, adding their corresponding counterparts in brackets. "You seem very quiet nowadays, Damien Chan," Nadia said as she admired the glorious night sky. I can tell you're dying to ask me something. The boy looked up at his mother, a little surprised. How can you tell? Nadia giggled, I could always see the grace in someone's heart. It was a little odd growing up, but now I'm glad to have it. She cupped Damien's nose, so, go ahead and ask. A quick silence followed until Damien finally brought up his thoughts. Can you tell me more about my birth, Mom? Nadia saw the solemn gaze of her son as she uttered a soft sigh. You are special, Damien-chan. A few months after my pregnancy, the doctor told me about your eventual death and it ate away at me, Nadia said as she stroked Damien's unique hair. Her eyes then drifted into an old memory. 7 years ago. Village hospital. Narahime, Narahi's sister, glanced at the pregnant woman who lay on the aged bed at the center of the room. It was nighttime and the chirps of crickets could be heard. And yet they were drawn out by the tense atmosphere present in the room. Is the medicine ready? Narahime yelled at the women gathered around the table by the side of the room. At the center of the table was a small bowl with green syrupy liquid inside of it. A nurse threw in a handful of ingredients and another nurse crushed them into a paste as they mixed. We need more magic berries. Ugh! Nadia groaned as her eyes failed to open, her hands felt heavy and her heart slowed down. Madam! She's not going to make it, and the baby will be out any second. Thwonk! The door bashed as another nurse ran in, a basket of small, green-colored strawberries in her hands. I have them. She quickly threw in a handful of the green fruits as they were crushed into the medicine pellet, overlooking one berry that was greatly different from the rest, equipped with black swirls. The nurse worked incredibly fast and a few moments later, the medicine was ready. Drink it, Nadia. Narahime's voice rang out as she placed the bowl by the dying woman's face. Nadia, with every bit of her strength, got up and began to drink. That's it. Nadia's face visibility scowled, the medicine was unusually bitter, disgusting even. Clatter. Narahime collected the bowl as she saw Nadia's pale face slowly brighten. The baby is coming. Find your strength and push, Nadia. Time passed and the tense room turned bright as a joyful atmosphere pervaded the walls. Nadia sat up, her tired eyes gazing at the wrapped-up baby in her hands. Narahime smiled as she wiped the now mother's sweaty forehead. What will you name him? She asked. Nadia peered at the child's crimson eyes as another face came into her memory. Damien, she answered. Einar D. Damien. Present time. Such a magical medicine. Damien muttered as he heard the entirety of the story. Nadia continued to stroke Damien's hair as she replied, though I've never tasted something so distasteful, it did lead to my beautiful boy's healthy birth. You are so much like your father, both in appearance and maturity. You were born so strong, much like him, you grow up too fast. She then grabbed Damien into a strong hug as she hummed a happy tune. Damien sighed in her surprisingly strong grip as he thought about her words. My father left to get the milk years ago. Leaving Mom so weak and sick, not exactly a strong figure to emulate, he thought. The name of his father was Einar D. Aries, a name Nadia chose for Damien to carry on. Time passed on as the village was enclosed in silent tranquility. A little too quiet. Creak. The docks at the very edge of the islands bellowed in disrepair as numerous boots slammed onto the wooden boards. A man with an eye patch stood at the front, a wild grin attached to his face. What a nice little place, let's go see what treasure it hides. If only the world could exist without borders, without violence, without greed, Nadia said as she sat under the calm moonlight. Damien remained quiet as he heard her words. He didn't believe such a thing was possible, both from the perspective of his old world and the new. Humans, or intelligent species in general, are destined to fight. Nadia wasn't naive enough to believe her own thoughts, she was just a little too kind. Nadia's eyes shot away from the starry night onto the quiet village, her gaze, wary. Moments later a smell of fire pervaded as the bright embers lit up certain parts of the village. What's going on? Damien stood up alongside his mother as they heard screams and painful groans echo throughout the area. Nadia squinted her eyes as she ran into the home, Damien left outside, frozen. Help! A bloodied man ran out from the faraway street, towards Damien's home. His eyes were swamped with fear as the bloodied trail followed him. Thump! The man fell not too far from Damien, his life near its end. Damien recognized him as Nakrasa, a fellow villager he'd known since he was a toddler. Who did this to you? Damien questioned as he put pressure on the gaping wound in his stomach. Damien, you must run. They're here, the pirates are here. With that, Nakrasa passed away, his eyes empty of all life. Damien gulped as he felt the man's body go limp, his first time seeing a corpse, let alone one from a murder. So this is where you ran, Lololo. Looks like there's another little house here for us to ransack. Damien's gaze fell upon a man in a red coat and shaggy beard. Fresh blood dripped from the sword in his hands as he licked the blade, a wide grin plastered to his face. Damien subconsciously took a few steps back as the pirate walked towards him. Don't worry, I'll end it quickly, the man roared as he dashed forward, his blade ready. Damien froze as he felt the cold grasp of death once again. And suddenly a sharp whistle resounded by Damien's ear as he saw a black shadow shoot towards the coming pirate. Ugh! The man roared out as he was shot back nearly 2 meters, his body impaled with a rusty spear. Damien turned his head to the side as he saw his mother as she stood near the door to the house. Nadia gazed at the dead villager as she walked to the fallen pirate. Her foot pressed into the ground as her hands grabbed the spear. Damien's eyes widened as he saw his mother shift the spear back and forward, causing it to cut apart more and more flesh of the pirate. Stop. It hurts? Nadia continued her actions as she questioned, how many of you are there? The man continued to groan but didn't answer. A look of impatience flashed by Nadia's eyes as more blood gathered under the pirate. The sound of gurgling flesh rang out as she weeded the spear out. Schwack! She then impaled the man's back as he exploded in pain. 80. There's 80 of us. Nadia took a deep breath as she heard the answer. The man then slowly gazed up, blood poured from his smiling lips. Both of you will die. You bitch! My boss will enjoy yo dash. A sharp screech rattled onto the man as his brain was overwhelmed with a powerful force, and his eyes rolled back into unconsciousness. Nadia turned around and gestured at Damien, Damien-chan, come with me, hurry. She yanked the spear out from the man without a second thought and ran into the island. Damien shook his head in disbelief, was my mom always such a badass? He looked at the pirate who was sure to die from blood loss, picked up his sword and ran behind his mother. Mom, shouldn't we run into the woods rather than towards the pirates? Damien questioned with uncertainty as he jumped over a fallen tree. Nadia looked to the side and shook her head as the two continued their run. That man had a crest of the blazing pirates on his coat, they like to burn down the villages and islands they loot. Hiding in the forest is death, and escaping through the sea in these currents is the same. She then looked at the village, sometimes the most dangerous place is the safest. No! An old man roared out as he grabbed a bloodied woman. It was Narahi, the village chief. His grief-struck face was covered in blood and tears as he held his dead sister. He picked up a rake and walked up. Hey, old man! Go join that old hag in the afterlife! A bald pirate laughed as he saw the enraged chief. Narahi swung the rake with all his strength, just for it to be dodged without problem. The pirate closed into the old man and drove his sword into his chest. Ugh! Narahi cried out as he fell to the ground. The pirate just snorted as he kicked the rake to the side. He was about to slash at Narahi's throat until an unsettling whistle broke out. The creaking of bones then followed as the pirate flew into the wall of the nearby house, his body 2 feet above the ground as a long spear was engraved in his heart. Narahi smiled at the dead pirate as he saw the 2 people walk to him, a woman and a young child. Nadia, you must hide, they are only the scouting party here and many more will come soon. Narahi's breathing then halted. Nadia smiled at him as a tear ran down her cheek. She gently closed the man's eyes. Damien who stood at the side could only gaze at his surroundings. The cheerful village, once a hub of joyful people was now turned into a hellhole. Dozens of bodies laid out, some in pieces, some unrecognizable. The creaky wood that once brought comfort and nostalgia bathed in blood, a heavy stench filled the air. Damien rolled his hands into a fist as he felt the despair bloom in his heart, mixed with anger, grief, fear, and wrath. Pat! He then felt a warm hand gently touch his cheek, it was Nadia who had come before him. Come, Damien-chan, we don't have much time. The two then ran deeper into the core of the village, the pirates' main party not too far. Here we go, Nadia muttered as they arrived at the center of the village, the well before them. Nadia was breathing heavily as she held the rusty spear in one hand. Her condition worsened due to her sickness. Damien turned to the side as he heard a bustling noise around 200 meters away, within the forested area. It was a group of men, around 70 of them. They marched closer by the passing second. Nadia noticed them as well and she moved fast. Creak. The wooden bar creaked as Nadia pulled up the bucket to the top. She turned to Damien and kissed his forehead. Damien-chan, I need you to do as I say, okay? Damien saw the look of his mother and felt a foreboding feeling. Nadia smiled at her child's worried eyes, hold on to the well, I need you to hide down below. Damien immediately refused, you should go first, Mom. The well is wide enough for us both. Nadia put her finger on Damien's lips as she shook her head. I can feel it, I don't have much time. I knew this day would come but I wish it wasn't under these circumstances. Nadia's voice cracked at the end as she tried to hide her distraught. You must live, Damien. If not for yourself, then do it for me. Damien was about to shake his head but then saw Nadia's unswerving gaze. He took a deep breath and nodded. Creak. The wooden bar that the rope was tied around creaked as Damien held onto it. The young child put his feet onto the cobblestone walls of the well and his hands tightly grasped the rope. Nadia smiled at Damien's agreement as she looked away into the forest. The pirates were only 40 seconds away. She then raised her hand into the air and closed her eyes. A soft wind blew through. Damien looked up after he secured himself, ready to rappel down to the bottom of the well, and saw something incredible. The tree not so far away started to shift from its stable position as it seemed to move on its own. The branches bent in unnatural, human-like movements as they seemed to reach down to Nadia's raised hand. The branch was now only 2 meters above her hand as it then seemed to shake. Another branch came from the side, only this time, it had something attached to it, a fruit. Snap! It was like a quick tear of a string as the fruit seemed to free itself from the branch and fall into the woman's grasp. Nadia eyed the black and red fruit with a soft smile. She then turned to Damien and met his shocked eyes. Take this, your father told me about magical fruits that gave powers, it has kept our village safe for years and I'm sure it will keep you safe too. She gently placed the fruit into the bucket as Damien did. The mother gazed into her son's eyes as if she were treasuring the moment and engraving it into her mind. The pirate's relaxed walk was just seconds away as Nadia gave one last kiss on his head as she gently said, "Go." Damien then started to rappel down, the rope barely holding his weight. His eyes were lost, knowing this was the last time he'd see his mother alive. The rocks that lined the 50-meter deep well began to chip away as Damien continued his descent. After around 30 meters, the rope seemed to start to give way from the weight. The individual strings that were spiraled around it began to stretch and tear. Damien felt the failing integrity of the rope and went faster. Snap! 5 meters further, the rope split. Damien's hands tried to grab at the moss-covered walls but they simply tore from Damien's momentum. The young man held his voice, gritting his teeth, and fell 15 straight meters down. Knowing such a fall could lead to grave danger, Damien shifted his weight such that his body was straight, his legs pointing down, and his knees bent. Alas, the fall came to an end. Crack! Ugh! Damien cried out as he held his mouth shut, his legs seemed to pulsate as he felt both of them break, his bones unable to fully absorb the force as they snapped without mercy. Spinal, pelvic, and other internal injuries were surely possible as well. Look at what we have here, a masculine voice boomed with a rather humorous tone. The pirate with nearly 70 other companions surrounded a silver-haired woman. What a beautiful woman! Captain, she'd sell for millions. Why don't we make sure she's up to standards ourselves? Nadia squinted her eyes at the pirates who glared at her with unsettling gazes. She twirled the spear in her hands, the drying blood on it stamped the grassy ground. The lead pirate cracked his knuckles in return as he gave an order, make sure she doesn't take any lasting damage. The pirates cheered in a boisterous manner. Nadia raised her empty hand. The pirates seemed alerted as the slender hand began to glow an unsettling green. She then suddenly made a fist. Creak! The forest nearby seemed to come alive as the branches suddenly shot out at incredibly fast speeds. Blood splashed out as tens of pirates were instantly killed by the attack, gaping holes left all over their now cadavers. Nadia then ran frontwards as she threw her spear at great speed, nailing the captain in the chest as he was nailed onto a tree nearly 5 meters away. You monster! A pirate roared out as he saw his companions getting ripped to shreds by the sharp branches. He ran forth at the woman only to have his throat pierced through by a 30-centimeter wide branch. Nadia kneeled to the ground, her hands still glowing green. The pirates were reduced to nearly half. Damn woman! You lot, light the forest on fire, I want to see how long she can do this for. Then men nodded as they ignited the woods with some oil and alcohol. The dry temperature quickly set the surroundings ablaze into a fiery hell. The heat invaded the area as the tree began to die out. What about the loot? A pirate questioned. Forget it. There should be heavy rain tomorrow, we will pick up what is left then, retreat for now. They then ran out from the slaughter as their numbers were reduced to around 30. Nadia broke out in a loud gasp for air. Ugh, she groaned, blood leaking from her mouth and nose. I can't let them get away or else Damien-chan will be endangered. No matter what. Stop. She fell to the ground while watching the 30 or so shadows disappear, the heat worsening her condition. Stop. In a last moment of desperation, Nadia seemed to unleash a burst of energy, taking everything out of her. A few seconds later, the 30 or so pirates slowly felt a great weight on them as their eyes rolled back into their skulls, dropping to the ground like flies. The fire only grew as their unconscious bodies were caught ablaze, leading to their untimely end. Nadia gave out a soft smile as she crawled near the well. She placed her bloodied hand onto the cobblestone walls of it. A green light suddenly emanated from her hand as it shined the walls of the well as they spread tens of meters down. The gaps in between seemed to shake as vines and moss burst out vibrantly, slowly growing and sprouting about. Within moments the wide open well seemed to close and sheets of green enclosed it wholly, making it seem as if the well went untouched for decades, overgrown with vines and moss. Nadia finally sighed in relief as her life began to give way. She finally leaned onto a crack in the ground that seemed to run into the well. Damien reeled in pain as he tried to right his body, straightening his broken legs. His face was bleeding heavily and a deep gash was adorned right above his right eye. It would certainly leave a mark. Aching pain pulsed through the left side of his body, originating from his hip. He slowly stabilized his breathing, knowing that he'd need to preserve energy. Damien looked up and saw the open night sky, and then suddenly felt the entire well shake. The open sky darkened into blackness as it was shut closed with vines and moss. This is Mom's fruit power. Damien's eyes widened in shock as he heard some whispers. His body was too hurt to speak, his consciousness was drifting in and out, but his ears picked up the sound. It was the sound of a breath, very faint but audible. Damien-chan. The boy tilted his head to the left and saw a crack in the wall. It was the sound of his mother running down the aged well. I don't know if you can hear me, Damien-chan, but I hope you can. Damien just stared at the cracked wall as tears seemed to escape his eyes. No matter what happens, no matter what tribulations you face, no matter who stands against you, just remember that your mom will always stand on your side. It will be very hard after tonight. But no matter what, the sun will rise in the morning and things will get better. Mom will say goodbye now, but do me a favor, please. I only want one thing from you, my treasured child. Gather those who you can trust with your life. Marry a beautiful girl. Treasure them deeply, for they will be your greatest strength. Live on for yourself, for me, for your father. Live, my child. Live. Damien's eyes slowly closed as the voice subsided, his mind unable to keep conscious. A deep silence seemed to shadow the entire village as the night ensued. A tragedy hidden away, forever unknown to the rest of the world. To be continued. Squawk. The crows flew about as a heavy rain fell upon Renaissance Island. It was now evening time. The blazing flame had left the trees to ashes, a once booming forest reduced to blackened wood and debris. Bloody rivers began to wash away in the storm to come. Near the docks. A heavy foot fell onto the wet docks as the coming ship lowered its anchors. The ship had a Jolly Roger attached to it. A skull with a flame behind it, the blazing pirates. The hell happened here? Didn't it say this was a forested island with 1,000 or so inhabitants? The captain of the ship questioned. The man had a red mohawk hairstyle and a crimson coat draped over his shoulders. Thick muscular arms crossed before his chest. He stood at a towering 12 feet stature. His name was Brando Ignis, a man with a bounty of 39 million berries. No clue, Cap, should we send out some scouts? Pabulum, the green-haired first mate, replied. He was also the ship's main strategist, his intelligence being his forte. Ignis gazed at the burnt island and shook his head. Let's all go. 3 hours later. Hey boss, you wanna check this well? Ignis walked through the destroyed land and saw what his subordinate pointed at. He gazed inside and saw a sheet of moss and vines covering it. He looked at the recruit. Slap. He smacked him upside the head, knocking him to the ground. You idiot, you think moss and cobwebs would grow overnight if someone was hiding down there? Ignis roared in impatience. He then pointed at the others. Look over the entire island, get the loot that remains, don't waste any more time. The fodders spread out. Pabulum walked ahead, a cigar in his mouth. Cap, you think someone killed all our men or those idiots fell drunk and got eaten by the fire? Ignis gazed at the dead men and shook his head. Someone killed them, but there is no one here. His eyes then locked onto the giant structure that was right next to the well's entrances. That tree, it might be worth something. I've never seen anything like it. Pabulum nodded as he looked at it as well, such a thick bark, and it also seems to have the face of a woman, rubu-bu-bu, to think such a tree could exist. The men weren't wrong for their thoughts. After all, there was a small mangrove of a few trees in the center of the island, whereas everywhere else was burnt to cinders. Not only that, the trees and greenery seemed to form the face of a beautiful woman, peering into the well as some flowers adorned her hair. Portrait image, in Discord. What the men didn't know was that the dried well did indeed have a person hidden away within. In the dark confines of the well were two sharp, crimson eyes, gazing into the darkness before him. As the saying goes, if you stare into the abyss stares back. Damien, who had woken up, felt a flurry of emotions. After drinking handfuls of rainwater, he had regained some energy. Many thoughts flashed through his eyes. He wanted to get up and find a way up, but something told him not to. He heard some whispers, not yet. And thus he waited while in deep thought. 7 years of peace, he muttered. After living a life of constant ups and downs, he was thrown into this world. It isn't wrong to say that he was lucky. Beyond the idea of being reborn and given a second chance at life, he also had many other fortunes. Compared to the children born into war and battle, he was indeed lucky. He didn't need to grow through a famine or drought, there was enough food, good people around him, and a loving mother. He fell into a delusion that he was safe in this remote village, willing to live out the rest of his life in this calm environment in the embrace of his loving mother, a feeling robbed from him in his previous life. It wasn't a cowardly wish, just a foolish one. Under the guise of this very peace and tranquility was the storm of reality that hit him last night. Mom is gone, and these bastards are here to collect the remains of whatever there even is. Damien clenched his hands into fists to the point that blood began to dribble out. Happiness, joy, and freedom are privileges only for the strong to enjoy, anything even remotely close to that for the weak is simply delusion. It's easy to give up, but if I do that, I would fail Mom. She carried me through 9 months of pain and sickness and cared for me for 7 years. The looming darkness continued as the red eyes hidden near the floor seemed to shine a fiery red. I will live on and claw my way to the top. 7 hours later. We found some jewelry that wasn't burnt by the fire and a decent amount of food hidden away, a pirate reported. The people who lived here weren't too stupid, they seemed to design a fireproof room to store the emergency food. Ignis nodded. At least it wasn't a waste of time, store it back onto the ship. We'll camp out here for a few weeks. Hunt for sea kings by the shore too, we need to make the quota and this island is known to have a good position for those fish, he ordered. The men nodded and began to move, leaving the well unattended. Had they remained, they would be surprised. The moss, vines, and even the spiders began retreating into the cracks of the walls as a ladder-like structure formed with the plants. After a good 15 minutes, a small hand reached the top of the well and a young boy climbed out. He was covered in sweat, grime, and blood. The boy reeked of many stenches as his ripped clothes made him seem as if he had survived a great disaster, and he had, for now, that is. Yet under all that filth were 2 bright eyes, filled with youth and determination. Finally those pirates left the area, I was getting tired of waiting. He then looked forward and saw it. A large collection of trees that seemed to reach nearly 50 meters in height. They grew out from the center that seemed to form the face of a woman with her eyes shut, asleep. Mom. Damien smiled slightly as he saw the marvelous greenery, and then he looked around him. His home was reduced to ashes. He clenched his fists once more and let out a deep sigh. Damien then gazed at his feet and his hand. The previously broken legs and bloodied hands were healed, completely. Even the deep gash on his face had healed, though it left behind a diagonal scar over his right eyebrow. His body was fixed, though remained emaciated. I finally figured it out, Damien said as he climbed out of the well. All those times where the trees and grass seemed to move near me, and now I am healing so fast, could it be? Was it Mom's devil fruit? Then why is it still active now? Once a fruit user dies, their abilities should disappear. Why do I have these powers? Damien had naturally taken baths in the sea before, he never felt any weakness, and yet he was born with certain unnatural powers. Damien touched the tree as he felt its vibrant life force, almost as if it was flowing in between his fingers. Mom seemed to have eaten her fruit at the moment of my birth, could it have gone to me? The boy then shook his head. No, she was also controlling the branches last night. So why? Damien failed to come up with an answer and moved on. If anything, Mom has been protecting me even after her death. And then his eyes fell into another deep thought. One piece has countless powers. She gave me so much and I returned nothing, maybe, just maybe, I can bring her back. A resurrection fruit? If the ope fruit can grant eternal youth, surely there is a fruit that can bring the dead back to life. Damien slowly nodded his head. Regardless, even if such a power exists, I need to get stronger. So strong that no one can ever hurt or take away the ones closest to me. No matter what. Grumble. Damien coughed slightly, his soliloquy was interrupted by his empty stomach, destroying the moment. First, I need some protein. 4 hours later. Hey, I could have sworn we had more heek food than this, no. He was naturally drunk. His companion looked to the barrels of food, his eyes heavy. Hey, whenever I look at the food it seems to double and quadruple in size. I'm sure it was nothing. The 2 men were on guard at the food storage as the others had gone to sleep, even the captain. What they didn't know was that there was a shadow sitting in the darkness, munching on some sea king meat. Delicious stuff. Damien felt the urge to burp and could only mask it with great effort. He had been eating. Eating well. He ate for almost 10 people in just 10 minutes. Food equals growth in one piece. Damien determined as he recalled the ginormous humans that exist, all of which seemed to eat quite a lot to get there. Though he didn't want to be 20 feet tall, Damien would want to at least reach the average admiral height of 10 feet. Therefore, he must eat. The next day, Damien stood at the edge of the island where his house used to be. Naturally, it too was eaten by the flame and reduced to cinders. He instead watched the calm seas, enjoying the salty sea air. The pirates on land stuck near the docks, mostly fishing for something in the sea. Renaissance Island is remote and away from the world, he muttered. Even the newspapers don't reach here. Naturally, Damien knew very little about the time of the seas. He needed information. Those pirates can enlighten me, but at my current level I'm no match and they will be gone soon, he surmised. Damien had a few choices. 1. Sneak on their ship and dock off at another inhabited island to gather information. 2. Wait for them to leave and make a ship, or wait for another ship to arrive and hope they're friendly. 3. Kill them all and pry the information from their soon-to-be writhing corpses. Though Damien could take one down and try to torture the truth from him, these pirates were quite punctual and a missing member would surely alert them. Taking one down would need more thought and power. Sneaking as a stowaway could work, but it may lead to a worse scenario. I could swim off, but the Sea Kings would love a free meal. Damien shook his head and continued to think. Waiting would leave little food available. I can't count on other ships' kindness either. He then gazed at the fruit in his hands. Though I can't take them down at my current level, this may just solve the problem. Damien then reached to his side and brought out a fruit. It was the same one that he had seen growing up and the one his mother left him with. The choice was clear. God bless, Bismillah, Amitba, may the force be with me, Godspeed, to infinity and beyond. Damien uttered some random prayers and hoped the gamble would pan out in his favor. He waited 1 second, then decisively bit the devil fruit. Crunch! The taste pervaded his mouth. Disgusting. Putrid. Vile. Repulsive. Unpalatable. Revolting. Sickening. Those were a few words Damien could use to describe the taste. The urge to throw up was there, but Damien persisted and swallowed the piece whole with determination. A few bated breaths and his eyes finally fell onto the quarter-eaten fruit. A sigh erupted. My paranoia will be the end of me. Crunch. Naturally, he knew a devil fruit ability could be granted with a single bite, but Damien's paranoia would not allow any chances. He ate it whole. Absolutely disgusting. He washed his mouth with some water and then focused on his newfound thoughts. A devil fruit seemed to come with an instruction manual that outlined the basics of the fruit alongside its name. He gazed at his hand and concentrated. A red mist of energy emanated from his fist as the air around it seemed to groan in pain. Damien walked up to a 2-meter-tall rock and touched it with his hand. Creak. The rock seemed to cry out as its entire body was covered in the same redness. Boom. It then exploded into thousands of small pieces as if detonated from within. Damien looked at the result. The tiny pebbles rained down, all equal in shape, mass, and size, as if they were cut by a million lasers. He then raised his left foot, which too began to glow the familiar yet eerily red. He tapped the ground with the raised foot. The sound of pixelation broke out as the ground, within 10 meters, seemed to turn into a large checkered field of tiny squares. Moments later the entire area crumbled into the same countless pieces, leaving a 10-meter-wide hemisphere depression on the land. Damien hummed in satisfaction. The ability to crush and cripple anything to everything into innumerable pieces through pressurization and pulverization. Paramecia type, pulverize fruit. The following night, more food disappeared from the storage as the guards continued to drink away their confusion. And then, one moved from his post. Oi, I'm gonna take a leak. The remaining guards seemed rather annoyed. Hurry up, if the cap noticed the disappearing food and will kill us both if it continues. Yet. Slow and limping steps resounded as the man walked off the ship near the shoreline under the vessel. He unzipped his trousers and gave out a sigh of relief. Zib. The pirate hummed in satisfaction. He looked up and enjoyed the night horizon. Ugh. And suddenly his vision went dark. The same pirate regained consciousness 10 minutes later as he ended up in an unknown area. Behind some large rocks that blocked the vision from the ship that now stood around 1.5 kilometers away. What the hell? He was about to get up and then a black shadow was cast over his body. Huh? A brat? Where'd you come fro? The child drove his foot into the man's liver area before he could finish his as the air in his lungs escaped without control. The pirate was only 6 feet tall, giving Damien enough confidence to take him down without much worry. Damien's hand shot forth and grabbed the man by his brown dreadlocks while grabbing his right arm as well. Here's how this goes, I ask, you answer. The pirate regained his breath and was about to struggle. A little boy thinking he's everything, let me teach you something, kid. The pirate began to wrestle out of Damien's clutches and then suddenly froze. A sound of pixelation seemed to resound on the calm shore as the man gazed at his grasped limb. The arm suddenly turned red as it abruptly ruptured into a mist of blood, dyeing the blackened soil a new crimson color. My arm! Ah! The man began to roll in pain as his cry sprang out in all directions, hoping it would reach his comrades. Unfortunately for him, a scream could only travel to about 1.2 kilometers and was unable to reach his companions. Damien then grabbed the man's remaining arm and began to speak, "Stop screaming or I'll double the pain. Answer my questions and it'll be over fast." The man woke up from his pain in great struggle as he gazed at the immature face of the boy. He saw black hair with red streaks running down one side and a thin scar above the right eyebrow. Damien saw his unrelenting eyes and channeled his power onto the limb. The pirate felt heat over his arm and immediately gave in. "Stop. I'll talk. Ask away." Damien waited a few seconds as his powers remained and waited for his orders to pulverize under the fearful eyes of the victim. Then slowly retreating, temporarily. Tell me who you are and why you're here. The pirate frantically nodded and began to say, weary the blazing pirates, our mission was to come to this island in search of a rare fish that migrates this season. He continued, we knew of primitive people living here so naturally they needed to be, are removed. Damien gritted his teeth as the man could only retreat in fear with an audible gulp. So you burned it down after ransacking it? The pirate squealed, it's the fastest way. His voice seemed to be filled with desperation as if wanting to convey that he was the victim and what transpired was only natural. Though it did give him a single second to notice Damien's pause of anger. Die brat! The man roared out as his remaining hand shot forth with a small dagger hidden in his pocket. The motion took barely a split second as the blade was inches away from Damien's throat. And yet it stopped. Drop! Droplets of blood fell as Damien's left hand held the blade in a vice-like grip, cutting into his palm. It hurts, but not as much as hearing my own mother breathe her final breath. The man's eyes widened as the dagger soon glowed the nostalgic red as it exploded into tiny metallic pieces, the moonlight reflecting off their surface. The young boy's hand then descended onto the pirate's remaining arm, causing it to explode into tiny chunks of flesh accompanied by a shower of blood. The screams continued as Damien gazed back down. He looked at his bleeding palm that had begun to heal, ignoring the pain. What about the Marines? The naval base on Greta Island is not too far out, there's no way a ship of 80 men could get here without stepping in their jurisdiction. The pirate began to cry with tears as he heard Damien's voice, knowing that the boy could explode in anger any second caused him to be quite truthful. We paid them off. The Marine captain in charge could care less if some small village outside of their jurisdiction gets raided. It's nothing new. Ugh, the cries of pain ensued alongside the explanation. Damien glared at the weeping man and could only accept the truth, some Marines are good, but just as many are corrupt and despicable. Beyond that, Renaissance Island was a poor island, naturally unable to pay the heavenly tribute and therefore not a member of the world government, the Navy had no duty to save them. The blackened soil crumpled as Damien walked towards the man and grabbed his head by the long dreads. You're right, leaving one's fate in the hands of others is the greatest sign of weakness. Thank you for teaching me that. The man thought this was his saving grace, ultimately, he was wrong. Splash! The head exploded like a grape, fresh blood and brain matter all in the shape of a few centimeter-wide cubes rained down. Damien's face was soon covered in the red liquid as he gazed at the headless body before him. The young child subconsciously took a deep breath as his hand shook slightly. This was the first life Damien had taken. It was an odd feeling, robbing a man of his life. Perhaps if this was before, Damien would be quite shaken up. But now, it just felt like it needed to be done, a soon-to-be natural part of his life. Damien then walked to the shoreline and washed his face and body, though his ripped clothes remained bloodied. He then kicked the body into the sea, such fresh blood would surely invite some sea kings to an open buffet. I swear, Captain, he said he'd be back soon, a pirate explained as his mouth dribbled with blood. Ignis snorted as he gazed at the pirate kneeling before him. Pabulum walked beside him and asked, Cap, I'll send out the men to scour the village, there's gotta be a few survivors here thinking to take revenge. But then the crew's strategist shook his head, though he could have become lost under this much sake, that fool. Ignis looked at his strategist and nodded, it should be nothing too serious. But we can't mess up the contract either, so it's best to check, if there are survivors then I hope they're ready to be skinned alive. The pirates nearby raised their weapons in agreement, however. Pitter-patter. A rather unnatural storm suddenly formed above, heavy rain pouring down without any prior forecast. Ignis looked up at the storm and squinted his eyes, though he felt something afoot, it was not that serious. Wait till tomorrow, let the storm clear away. On the other side of the island. What a random storm, Damien commented as he felt the rain wash his clothes, his hair already damp. He went back to the familiar edge and thought to wait out the storm. The pirates were his target and they required some thinking to remove. His devil fruit worked great in close combat and even had some range capabilities Damien wanted to try out. Since the blazing pirates were offering themselves as training targets, Damien could only humbly accept. Yet the storm had other ideas. Damien suddenly felt a chill pass over his body as he subconsciously looked up and saw some bright plasma. Boom! Thunder roared as a sharp bolt of lightning bathed Damien with 300 million volts of electricity. And it all went black. Time passed. 10 minutes of rain continued as the downed child slowly regained consciousness. His fingers twitched under the sound of heavy rain. The crimson pupils reappeared as the boy sat up without difficulty. What the hell, did I just get struck by lightning? He looked over his body and didn't see much, not even any Lichtenberg figures. There were no other obvious markings of what had happened either. No displaced soil, no charred ground, no echoing sound. At first glance, it was as if nothing odd even happened here. Perhaps I used all my luck on this devil fruit and the lightning strike was the remaining bad luck. I wouldn't say that. Damien blinked. He looked around and saw the usual blackened soil, though swamped in water, there wasn't anyone else. Don't look around, I'm inside of your mind. The young boy stabilized his breathing. Perhaps the influx of emotions is causing hallucinations, it'll pass, he comforted himself. I assure you, you are of sound mind. I am a collection of intelligence and data called Sybil. Damien took another deep breath and chose to humor the insanity, a collection of intelligence and data? A system, like from those trashy fanfics I read in my previous life. You could consider me so. Though I would appreciate not being associated with the term, trashy. Damien slowly nodded, okay, whatever. Though I think you're a little late, 7 years at that. Shouldn't you be thrown into this world with me? Not exactly. You see, I am not your system and neither was I paired with you. If it makes any difference, I have been searching for you for centuries now. Damien could only pause, though Sybil continued. I cannot say much, just know that my true user, the person I was sent with, fell dead many, many years back. I have been searching for you throughout the entire world since that day. It took a while to lock onto this primitive island so far from the epicenter of worldly powers. Why am I here? Does my rebirth into this world have to do with this original system host of yours? Damien asked a barrage of questions. Your rebirth here was directly caused by the original host, yes. But I cannot give you any more answers, unfortunately. My memory was locked away and I only had the mission to find you. Damien shook his head in slight disappointment. And what exactly will you do now that you found me? Sybil replied in her usual tone, my duty is to assist you in gaining strength and power. Ready you for a certain objective that too was locked away. Damien scowled, disliking the idea of being led on by some aged mission he could care less about. Don't worry, every lock has a key. I'm sure there's one out there that will answer your questions. I know it may worry you to be kept in the dark but I can only ask for your patience, Damien. Damien could only relent, fine. Tell me how you can assist me. I can grant you a storage space, first of all. It will allow you to store inanimate objects. I can translate the data of the world into text to be displayed. I can store any information you need to archive to be pulled whenever. Damien blinked. All you have is storage, some worldly details, and a notes app. It was certainly a slight letdown, though Damien was ready to train for power, he wouldn't mind some freebies. At least tell me you have some immediate benefits. Unfortunately, reality was often disappointing. Nope. As I said, you are not the original host, therefore, the gift pack was opened by the original host and that is it. Damien rubbed his head in thought as Sybil continued with some decent news. However, the previous user did send you some tools to aid in your path to power. Though I currently need to observe the surroundings, being in motion for centuries has led me to a need to update. It will take a handful of days. Damien waved the little delay aside but then asked a question that was on his mind. Sybil, he said in a solemn tone. Can I rid myself of this system of yours at any point in time? Though Damien didn't mind the bonuses of the system, he was wary of the story behind it and naturally had some reservations. Yes. 2 days later. Time flowed as a couple of days went by. The missing pirate was never found and the others gave up, concluding the man was swept away by the storm. It was barely 8 AM and the pirates had spread out once more throughout the island, looking for their missing comrade. Kulalala. I got one. A pirate suddenly pulled hard on his rod as a shadow of a fish shot out from the sea. Most of them continued the daily fishing, having already caught 90 of them. They were only a meter in length and had a small pink body that was only a third of their size. The rest was a gorgeous rainbow-colored tail, giving them a mystical appearance. They were called the rainbow betta fish of West Blue. Image, in Discord. Good work, we are only 10 short of the quota then we can get off this burnt rock, the pirate's partner said. Ignis who was drinking by the side nodded in satisfaction. He then glared at his strategist, Oi, Pabulum. You still think someone's after us? Igu. Give it a rest and drink with me. Pabulum slowly nodded, though his thoughts elsewhere, this unsettling feeling, I cannot put my finger on it. Could a survivor have killed that fool? He then shook his head and went to reluctantly drink. 6 hours later. That's the last one. Cheers. All done. A banquet exploded at the large ship as the pirates raised jugs of sake in celebration. A boisterous environment ensued as the warm night continued. Though none of them saw a pair of crimson eyes watching them from a distance. A fiery glint passed by the pupils as the night passed on. Suffice to say, a bloodbath would soon arrive. Chug. 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 The festive mood continued as the men partook in the joyful occasion. It certainly was not odd for such parties to erupt in pirate crews. Ignis sat at the core of the ship as he too raised his drink and devoured liters of the forsaken liquid. Hey, when did we bring a brat on board? A drunken pirate questioned with a mix of confusion and joy. His friend beside him also joined in, Oya? How come I don't remember having this kid on our crew? Damien now stood at the bow of the ship. He gazed at the banquet before him and raised his left hand. A red glow encompassed the palm as crimson energy seemed to swivel within it. The drunken pirates didn't think too much of it. Oh, so he's the one with the party tricks. Wait, that is Dash. Utter ruin. The churning red currents suddenly acted in tandem as they exploded into a crimson light, shooting out in a river of blazing wisps. Boom. The pulverizing energy raged out as if a dam had given way, the horizontal stream simply extended without stopping and left a shredded and crushed trail of utter destruction. As it encountered its first human obstacle, the energy ripped into the man's body as it was enveloped in the eerie red glow, exploding into a mist of flesh and bones. The current shot its way through the ship, obliterating every pirate that stood in its way while reducing them to macro-sized cubes. AHH. Ew. Ugh. Ouch. Ruah. Screams and cries of pain broke out. Those who were only partially in the way of the current had limbs or parts of their bodies removed. It was simply horrifying. 20 of the 80 pirates died while another 10 were missing parts of their bodies and therefore incapacitated. Run, he's got some witchcraft. Mama no. My leg. Ignis, who was able to dodge out of the way in time, could only look up in great worry. An ability user. Pabulum commented as he unsheathed his rapier. So I was right, there was someone ready to take us down. Ignis picked up his axe and roared in anger, damn brat. He waited right till we were all drunks. Men, kill him. Most of the remaining pirates picked up their weapons and charged forth. Damien squinted his eyes as he readied his fists, each glowing the familiar red. The flash of indecision from hordes of people looking to kill you passed by quickly, leaving a determined expression behind. It was beyond reckless to dive into such a party with little to no training, but Damien knew this was his last chance before the pirates would leave. Information with a sprinkle of vengeance was his greatest motivation. Swish! One pirate with a sword slashed at Damien as he sidestepped, allowing the weapon to get lodged into the ground. Seeing this opening, Damien drove his left fist into the man's liver area, kicking the air out of his lungs. The man then glowed red and exploded into pieces. Another 3 came running from separate angles. As they were drunk, it wasn't difficult for the smaller Damien to dodge the attacks, after all, a single touch would take them all out. Slam! A pirate suddenly jumped from the upper deck onto the one where Damien was, slashing his saber right away. Damien's glowing fist collided with the blade and it shattered like glass. Damien's hand then grabbed the man's throat and stomach. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots went off as a couple of gunmen unloaded their flintlocks in Damien's direction. The young boy used the pirate in his hands as a meat shield. He then tossed the dead pirate in the air as he exploded like a firework. The blood showered down caused the gunners to wipe their eyes, by which Damien had already arrived and taken them out. Die, kid. You're surrounded. Lights out for you. Out of nowhere, 20 men rushed around Damien, forming a complete circle. Damien hummed as he crossed his hands in front of him, the opposite hand pointing out to each side. The desire to name his every move was overpowering, perhaps originating from him being in an anime world. Obliteration pulse. The pirates' faces were swamped with fear as they saw the familiar red energy rage its way towards them. Damien's body pulsed out with a full 360-degree attack as all within 10 meters of him were reduced to minced meat. The wooden boards were now slicked in blood and the heavy smell pervaded within the entire area. Ignis scowled in both anger and fear as he saw his fine men reduced from a staggering 80 to the now less than 30 could only shake in fear. I am outta here. I don't get paid enough for this. Sorry Cap, but that kid is far scarier than you. The majority of them chose to jump ship, leaving barely 10 men behind with their fearful captain. Damien slowly walked forth, trying his best to use as little stamina as possible. He had only eaten the devil fruit a mere 3 days ago and could only do some basic attacks, of which each drained a noticeable amount of stamina. Killing so many people. Damien thought to himself. If someone told me I would be slaughtering tens of people like this a few days ago, then I would probably laugh them off. He thought while shaking his head. But here I am, taking life without second thought. A slight sigh as the boy shook his head, snapping out of his reverie. Step step. Ignis subconsciously took a few steps back but then snorted. Ugh, enough of this nonsense. You know who I am, brat? I have a 39 million bounty and am the captain of the Blazing Pirates. You idiots. Kill the ones that jumped ship while I take care of this red-eyed boy. Damien hummed in return as he readied himself to fight the towering man who stood over twice his height. A deep breath to calm his thoughts, allowing his instincts to take over. Any staggering thoughts were converted into sheer will and commitment to his actions, born from his mother's final words. Ignis roared out as he shot forward with his axe. Boom! A giant hole was left on the ground as Damien sidestepped. The boy tried to throw a punch at the pirate but then lowered his head. Bang! A surge of instincts told him to retreat as the other pirates tried to shoot him down. He raised his left foot as it gathered with his pulverizing energy and slammed it onto the ground. The sound of pixelation erupted as the entire main deck seemed to be filled with a red checkered pattern. Boom! Around half the floor crumbled and gave way. Ugh! The pirates fell nearly 8 meters, left with bruises and broken bones. Damien gave out some short breaths as his stamina began to plummet. The hair on the back of his neck suddenly stood as Damien felt the chill of death. Boom! As he moved to the side, the entire ground previously under him was destroyed. The 12-foot-tall, 3.66 m, giant stood before Damien with his trusty axe. Damien took a deep breath as he rushed ahead with great resolve. Whoosh! Ignis waved his axe horizontally as the air whistled in return. Damien sprang into the air with all his energy, clearing the axe and then extending both his arms to grab the pirate's knees. The red energy swam out and wrapped itself around the man's legs as they glowed red. Ah! Ignis roared out like a dying boar as his body fell to the ground, his legs reduced to tiny cubes. Why you damn brat! Ignis' unyielding gaze met Damien's eyes as he saw the sharp glint in the red pupils. The boy reached out and grabbed the enemy captain by the head. This is for my mother. Crumble! A thin current of pulverizing energy then swam out from Damien's palm and into Ignis' head, swimming its way through his brain and down his entire nervous system. Each cluster of nerves was enveloped in the crushing energy as the unimaginable pain clouded the pirate's eyes. Ugh! It hurts. Stop, just kill me. It didn't take long for the squirming pirate to beg for death as moments passed and the torture only continued. Damien's face showed tiredness as he felt ounces of stamina remain. Ignis' eyeballs soon popped out of their sockets as blood dribbled out from all orifices. Splatter! Like a watermelon, he exploded in a flurry of red. Thud! Damien fell to one knee, trying to stabilize his breathing. Though it seemed that the danger had not entirely disappeared. Swish! A sharp whistle and a wave of pain. Blood erupts as Damien's upper chest goes hollow as a thin and sharp rapier blade cuts right through his sternum. Ugh! The dripping of the red liquid created quite the melody as the boy was swarmed with intense pain. You left your back open, kid. Damien tilted his head to see a green-haired man standing behind him. Pabulum, the ship's strategist. He had been hiding under 2 corpses, even using his own captain as bait. Better I get all the cash for that fish, Papa. You did me a solid. Damien's pained eyes suddenly flash as his hands shoot out and grab the rapier. A moment passed as a familiar scene went down, followed by the sound of pixelation. Phew! Pabulum retreated as he saw his weapon explode into tiny bits while seemingly shocked. You, fool! You want to bleed to death that fast? I pierced your lung with that one. Pabulum's smile then vanishes as he sees his young adversary stand up. Damien's clothes had mostly been ripped and the bloody hole was visible. The flesh around it seemed to squirm as squishes of blood were heard, and yet the hemorrhaging began to stop. The wound, at least from the outside, was sealed. Damien let out a deep sigh as he wiped the blood off his now closed chest. That hurt. Pabulum gulped as he fell to the ground, tripping over his fallen companion with a thud. A shadow cast over his body as he saw the menacing red in the young boy's eyes. Pabulum instinctively knew that he could only rely on one method to get out of this alive: scare away the threat. Listen kid, you don't know who you're messing with," he said. "We're just doing the bidding of one of the 5 families of the West." Pabulum saw Damien pause and continued in a hurried tone, "If you let me go, I can get them their goods and say the others died from the storm, a win-win, and no." Damien recalled some info from his past life. The 5 families of the West were 5 enormous mafias that controlled underworld operations in the West Blue. Luke Beeg headed one of such families before becoming a supernova. Pabulum then saw Damien reach out and grab him by the throat. "So am I right to assume they were the ones who gave you the intel for this island and paid the Marines off?" Pabulum regained some courage and nodded, "That's right. The Gambino family did this, I just followed orders. It's best if you let me go and nothing will change." Damien squinted his gaze upon the man, "Don't worry, they'll get what's coming for them." His hand then swirled with the crushing red energy as it enveloped the strategist's body, "They will join you soon." Splatter! The raided ship was practically painted red after Damien had finally completed his goal. Thud! Damien then fell to the ground, laying out in a T-shape as his body recovered. His insides were still damaged and would take a few hours to fully heal. As for his stamina, it too was practically empty. Sure enough, Damien's gamble had panned out in his favor. 30 minutes later, Damien slowly got back up, his bones giving slight cracking noises as the joints were moved after a while. He had enough energy to move around but he needed food. Before that, there was one thing to check. Creak. Damien walked into the captain's quarters and looked around for some goodies. And lo and behold, some interesting things were there. First, he saw 2 bounty posters smacked on the walls of the cabin. "I guess it fills one's pride to see their infamous poster, how conceited, though I'd probably do the same," Damien said as he glanced at the pages. "Wanted. Pabulum. Green Fox. 12,900,000. Dead or alive? Dash wanted dash. Ignis. Blazing X. 39 million. Dead or alive? Damien also found a chest filled with banknotes. A directory noting the exact amount, 14.4 million berries. There were some cheap compasses and maps laid on the desk alongside some empty sake cups littered on the floor. The room reeked of sweat and alcohol. Damien then reached for the drawer and found a thick red book, as thick as a telephone directory from his previous world. Thunk. He plopped it on the desk and read the bolded title. Devil Fruit Encyclopedia. Image, in Discord. Damien nodded at the contents and flipped his way through it. There were three main sections, Paramecia, Zoan, and Logia. Though Damien did see that some familiar devil fruits could not be found. Such as the dark fruit. Interesting, oh ho, look at this, he murmured as he went to the Paramecia section. The subheadings were bolded. Internal type, external type, secretion type, release type, support type, special type, and disaster type. Each fruit was associated with a picture of the fruit itself. Damien looked over some interesting fruit powers. Special Paramecia type. Mochi fruit, allows the user to create, control, and transform into mochi, making them a mochi human. Ope fruit, the user can create a spherical space in which the user has complete control over the placement and orientation of the objects inside, making them a free modification human. Soul fruit, the user can freely interact with and manipulate human souls, making them a soul manipulating human. Balance fruit, the user can freely switch anything of equal value. This can be a physical, psychological, spiritual, or cosmic exchange, making them a Madtita Kof and all-conserving human. Damien then turned to another section. Disaster type Paramecia. Tornado fruit, the user can summon tornadoes of varying intensity, making them a tornado human. Gravity fruit, the user can create and manipulate gravitational forces, making them a gravity human. Tremor fruit, the user can create vibrations, or quakes to cause enormous damage, making them a tremor human. Pulverize fruit, gives the user the ability to crush anything into pieces, making them a pulverizing human. Weather fruit, user gains complete control over the weather, making them a weather human. Clank fruit, allows the user to create things by combining inanimate objects at will, making them an assimilation human. How familiar, Damien muttered as he saw the black and red fruit in the image. Damien spent the next 15 minutes just going over certain fruits, admiring the crazy and weird devil fruit powers that existed, on record that is. Naturally, certain fruits with more special characteristics were kept hidden or unknown. His eyes then drifted to a newspaper wrapped up with a string. He unfurled the paper as he smelled the nostalgic aroma of ink. What the hell? He uttered. And it wasn't wrong to do so, after all, the date wasn't what Damien was expecting. He then heard a familiar voice in his mind. Damien, I have completed my update and am ready to assist you henceforth. How could this be? This makes no sense. It was the first time Damien heard panic in Sybil's voice. Damien, you are early. Way too early. He blinked as he read the date once more. The paper was recent, dated February 21, 1474. Roger reigned over the seas well after the 1490s and became the king of the pirates by 1499. This wasn't Luffy's era, nor was it Roger's era. It was Rock's era. Rock's DZBek. That was the name of the taboo existence that struck fear into the masses before Roger. And yet, he was eventually forgotten, or more specifically, erased. The world government made it their mission to wipe out any remnants of the name, alongside the terrifying Rock's pirates that once roamed the seas under this man. Edward Newgate, Charlotte Linlin, Kaido, Shiki, Captain John, Silver Axe, Wang Ji. 3 of the future 4 emperors. A man who was known to equal Whitebeard and Roger in his heyday. A man whose treasure was sought after by many far past his death. The final 2 men were supposedly known for their strength, enough for their names held high. All these fearsome pirates were once under the captaincy of Rock's DZBek. It came down to the unpredictable alliance between Roger and Garp to take him down. Damien took a deep breath as he recalled these thoughts from his previous life, information shared by Sengoku. It was a time of untold turmoil, a time which was 1,000 times more chaotic than the one the protagonist of the series, Luffy, was born. An odd grin grew on Damien's face. If this was before, I would probably be quite unsettled, but now, it may just give me the best time to achieve the strength I desire, he exclaimed with determination. However, there was a problem. Damien was weak. Ridiculously weak. Rock's pirates? He is barely strong enough to take down a drunken pirate worth 39 million berries. That was quite literally loose change before the monsters under Rocks. Damien clenched his hand into a tense fist, feeling his weakness. No matter what, I will never let my future be controlled by others ever again, even if it comes at the cost of my life. His thoughts then went elsewhere. Sybil, what did you mean by me being too early? He asked. There was a slight pause. I don't know much as the truth was locked away from me as well. However, I was programmed to remember that you were to arrive at a much later time, around 45 years from now. Simple arithmetic would lead to the year 1519. Awfully close to when Luffy set out. Why do I feel like this wasn't a coincidence? Damien thought. He shook his head. Now that he was here in such an era, he had no intention of fulfilling the grand mission set for him by someone centuries ago. Tell me about what you left off with days ago about the original host's items, Damien said. Yes, they are there to assist you. I'll list them out. 1. Count's regal attire, an attire that grows with its user and can be reformed after combat. 2. 3x fruit ability transfer token, allows you to take a fruit ability and translate it into an auxiliary power, can only be support type, IG, hard skin from a defensive zone, cell change to rubber from gum fruit, etc. 3. Locked skills, underwater breathing and underwater maneuverability. 4. 1x map of surroundings, can showcase nearby terrain. 5. 1x universal pose, can be used as a log pose, or eternal pose for an indefinite amount of uses. Eternal requires previously being on the island in question. 6. Sea stone pendant, can grant sea stone immunity as it's worn over a duration of time. 7. Skill, evol-able anatomy, allows the user's physique to evolve as overall strength increases. Damien took a deep breath as he went through each of the items. His eyes were first attached to the second one. Sybil, tell me more about the transfer tokens, he asked. Sybil replied in her usual polite tone, these were actually from the original host's beginner gift box. He was given 7 of them and only ended up using 4, ultimately leaving the remaining 3 for you. She continued, it essentially allows you to transfer a fruit ability to yourself. This ability is absorbed as a skill to be used whenever. Damien thought of Blackbeard's multi-fruit capabilities but then felt that seemed too good to be true. However, you cannot take just any fruit. Only auxiliary abilities can be transferred from a fruit. In other words, these can only support you in your endeavors and not be used in battle to cause harm to others. Damien sighed in agreement. Though he can't use them to carry multiple fruits, he may be able to get some useful bodily property to enhance his combat output. A/N, I'm not a fan of multi-fruit as they usually bland out the story. Damien will however find innovative ways to use other types of attacks, so don't take it too literally. What's with the locked skills? He then asked. He was referring to underwater breathing and underwater maneuverability. These are abilities created by the original host, they allow you to go around the curse of the sea. Much like how a fruit-using fishman can breathe underwater but not move around. If you pair these two concepts, you can achieve a remedy for said curse. Damien nodded as he recalled Jack from the anime, being able to breathe while immobile under the sea. Sybil elaborated, you can unlock the two when you reach certain levels of strength. Damien rolled his eyes, might as well just give them to me. It's to test your mettle, ensure you can grow without such things and not become reliant on them. Speaking of strength levels, I need your permission to go through your memory. With that, I can generate a flowchart of strength leveling that you can understand. Damien thought for a second and eventually relented, go ahead. He didn't have any major secret to hide from his mundane life back on Earth. 1 second. Damien played around with the universal pose which looked like any log pose from One Piece as Sybil did her thing. This attire is pretty sweet, not gonna lie, the boy muttered as he laid out the Count's regal attire. It was a nice, dark-themed attire. It didn't stand out from afar but still looked very pleasing to the eye. It had a sense of mystery due to the enchantments. Allegedly it can grow alongside Damien and even repair itself over time. It was certainly solid enough to stop your average bullet. The map of surroundings, universal pose and ability tokens were stored in the inventory as Damien brought out a small pendant. It was a simple locket with a palm-sized black-colored stone hanging from it. Just touching it caused Damien to feel a stinging and numbing sensation. He put it around his neck and lay back down, trying to get used to the feeling. Sybil then returned. Okay Damien, I translated out a series of levels of strength. I found some rather questionable web novels you read had similar ideas, so it should seem simple enough to understand. Paradise Pirate, level 1 to 5, rightward arrow New World Pirate, rightward arrow Yonko Crew Pirate, rightward arrow Pseudo Yonko Commander, rightward arrow Yonko Commander, tiers, bottom/middle/top, rightward arrow Pseudo Yonko, rightward arrow Yonko, tier, bottom/middle/top, rightward arrow Beyond Yonko. Sybil continued, also, Damien. I noticed in your memory that you spent quite a lot of time playing games. I was able to manifest a statistics interface that emulated these details. You mean like a stats panel? Show me what you mean. Damien then saw a blue screen pop up in his mind with details. Age, 8 years, 20 days. Height, 5, 1.52 m. Status, tired, hungry, weakened. Devil fruit, pulverize fruit, initial mastery. Fruit rating, 6.5 stars. Sea stone resistance, 0.08%. Skills, enhanced recovery, enhanced vitality, evolable anatomy, natural conscience, will of D. Strength, paradise pirate, level 3. Equals dash equals dash, dash 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 equals dash equals. Glossing over the stats, Damien nodded at the devil fruit info. Supposedly, a devil fruit's mastery went from initial, intermediate, advanced and finally to grand mastery, aka, awakening. A/N, considering Luffy's progress, you can say his Gear 2 and 3 were intermediate mastery, Gear 4 was advanced mastery, and his awakening would be grand mastery. He also saw the sea stone resistance, just by wearing it now he had already developed some immunity to the metal. His eyebrows then furrowed at the skills list. Sybil, these skills. She replied sharply, yes. It seems you are more of an anomaly than I thought, Damien. From what I can tell, you somehow inherited enhanced recovery, enhanced vitality, and natural conscience. A display then appeared in Damien's head. Enhanced recovery, increases bodily recovery to superhuman levels. Enhanced vitality, increases bodily endurance to superhuman levels. Natural conscience, allows the user to hear nature, nature will also protect the user. Inherited. Damien muttered as the figure of a white-haired woman came to mind. She continued, I can conclude from your memory that your mother's devil fruit power is all linked to the aforementioned abilities. As you were born at the same time as she ate the devil fruit power, you seemed to have siphoned a part of the fruit ability into your own body, hence being born as healthy as you were. Damien's heartbeat suddenly spiked as he heard her words, but if a person eats the fruit even once, the ability is wholly consumed into them. A scary thought came to the boy as he couldn't help but freeze, my mom's bodily weakness could have been resolved had I not been born. Then the image of the kind Nadia came, forcing Damien to shake his head with a deep sigh. But I also know she would hate for me to think of it like that. Damien calmed himself down. Rather, Mom has been protecting me since I was born and even after her death. Now that I think of it, controlling and conversing with nature seems like a paramecia. But enhanced bodily recovery and super endurance is more of a zoan. His mind then clicked, a mythical zoan. Sybil then chimed in, yes, that adds up. As mythical zoans come with an array of abilities, both your mother and you ended up gaining abilities. It should be considered a miracle. Damien then looked over the other two skills. Will of D. Inherent skill, passed down from either or both parents. An abstract ability with undefined powers. Evolable anatomy, allows the user's physique to evolve as overall strength increases. Naturally the former came from his absent father, it seemed that One Piece had a knack for deadbeat dads. I wonder if I can reach Kaido's endurance level with the second skill. Damien wondered. Hey Damien gave out a deep breath. He was hungry, sweaty, bloody, and quite overwhelmed with a boatload of information. Such an info dump was beyond his expectations, leaving him with a lot of thoughts and hunger. Moving on, he quickly dispatched the remaining pirates who had fallen into the lower level of the ship and went to dine on the blazing pirates' food supply. There was enough food for 80 people that could last a few months. Naturally, it would go bad soon, so Damien had no qualms about munching it all down. 2 hours later, Damien ensured the ship was docked, intending to use it to sail out in a handful of years. Damien wanted to punish those who caused his mother's death, such as the Gambino family. But he also knew that with his current strength, departing to the unpredictable sea was not a good idea. He eventually made his way to the edge of the island once more, a nostalgic spot. Gazing at the horizon was always a glorious and soothing sight. It calmed his desire for vengeance, allowing him to think things through. I guess a training arc is necessary, he muttered. My devil fruit drains way too much stamina, way too fast. The first aim is to train my body and stamina. He had drawn out a training guide. It was based on some athletes from his previous life mixed with Might Guy and Saitama. He had to multiply the exercise intensity by quite a factor as One Piece's bodily capabilities were crazy high. A tiny child who hasn't fully grown could easily take down a giant beast had they trained enough. Outside the training was the diet aspect. He had to eat a lot. Damien felt that his body was devouring the food without stopping. Sybil, bring up the training routine I made. Coming right up. Daily workout. Stretching for 15 minutes. Run, 10 kilometers. Hand walk 500 meters. 500 push UPS. 200 fingertip push UPS. 500 sit UPS. 1 leg forward hops, 100 meters each side. Wall sit, 5 sets for max time. Double lateral hops, 100 each side. 500 punches to striking post, tree. 500 kicks to striking post, tree. Naturally, the intensity was only set for his current body and it would drastically increase in time. The next morning, Damien had woken up and was ready to begin his hell training. ready to take his first step towards the path to power. Renaissance Island, West Blue. Coo, an owl cried out as it flapped and rested on a small oak-like tree. It was curiously gazing at a human who was dancing around. It saw a black-haired boy with red streaks running down the left side punching and kicking at a worn-down tree. The island that was once all green then burnt down, had recovered a decent amount of greenery. The rejuvenation was unnaturally quick, especially the nature around the center of the island which had become especially vibrant. 4996. 4997. 4998. 4999. 5000. The boy gave out a short sigh, and, done. Creak. He then watched as the whittled-down tree gave out and fell with a loud crash. Behind the young man was a trail of numerous downed trees. The perpetrator was obvious. Damien, who had just finished his daily tree-beating training, rubbed the back of his head in slight embarrassment. It's a good thing Mom's power still seems to bloom nature here, otherwise I really would be sued for deforestation. The aspiring pirate had grown in many ways. Before even touching on strength growth, there was a height increase. It had been a little under 7 years since his clash with the blazing pirates. Damien was now 14 years of age and naturally had been through a spike in terms of height. With the high protein intake from feasting on large fish and smaller sea kings, alongside the extremely cooperative plant life, Damien had quite the healthy boost in all ways. He now stood at a strong 8 feet 2 inches 2.49 meters. Damien could be considered a towering specimen had this been his previous world, the NBA would surely be hounding him away. However, in the One Piece world, this height could be considered a giant to some, but a midget to just as many. In other words, tall and short were highly subjective in this world. Another thing that accompanied his growth was a weird tick in his laughter. Every time he laughed, the first syllable seemed to direct itself to a certain R sound. Damien's body had also developed quite well, his muscles were defined, not bulging, as most of the protein went towards his growth, but it could be considered an enviable physique to many. Going outside of physical growth, there was the higher level of stamina and endurance that Damien had earned. The blazing pirates were of no difficulty had Damien encountered them now. Sybil, pull up my stats, he ordered as he donned his count's regal attire. Roger Roger. Equals dash equals dash, dash 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 equals dash equals. Einar D. Damien. Age, 14 years, 6 days. Height, 8 feet 2 inches, 2.49 m. Status, slightly tired, healthy. Devil fruit, pulverize fruit, initial mastery. Fruit rating, 6.5 stars. Sea stone resistance, 23.9% upward arrow. Skills, enhanced recovery, plus, enhanced vitality, plus, evol-able anatomy, natural conscience, will of D, primitive shave. Strength, pseudo Yonko commander upward arrow. A/N, it was stated that the average fodder in a Yonko crew was Erlong level. Thus Damien is at a level a little above that. Equals dash 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 equals. Damien had vastly focused on physical attributes throughout the years and his anatomy was ready for an upgrade, hence the plus indication. Due to this focus on the bodily increase, Damien even tapped into a special movement ability which he promptly named as primitive shave. It was similar, though a simpler version of the Rokushiki used by the world government and navy, Soru, shave. Its main use was the instant teleportation-like movement which allowed its user to appear a few meters away from their original location. The way to use it was by kicking the ground tens of times nigh instantly to achieve its effect. Though my devil fruit mastery remains at the initial level, I can surely use it far less restrictively, he said. It was a completely different story unlike before where he was tired from just showcasing a handful of attacks. This all boiled down to the level of a pseudo-Yonko commander. Damien wasn't entirely sure as to what that entailed, but he would probably be around Luffy's strength level when he raided Marineford during the Summit War. After all the training, it seems my evolvable anatomy has kicked in, Damien murmured as he saw the plus sign next to 2 skills. Not only was the upgrade availability written out but Damien could also feel it. It felt like a dam within his own body was waiting to burst open. He didn't need to ask for directions from Sybil, he simply closed his eyes, took a deep breath and concentrated on his breathing. A few moments passed as he felt his bones and skin bubble in heat. Damien groaned as his entire skeletal system began to vibrate, his joints and muscles ripped and dissolved as strong flesh regrew in place. His skin cooled down as great power gathered around his limbs. Enhanced recovery has evolved into rapid recovery. Enhanced vitality has evolved into beastly vitality. Damien exhaled a heavy breath as the evolution concluded, his entire body felt invigorated with newfound strength. Rapid recovery, 3 times the speed of enhanced recovery. Beastly vitality, 3 times the durability of enhanced vitality. Satisfied with the boost in his physical capabilities, he then made his way to the center of the island, to a site that was very dear to him. 10 minutes later. Damien now stood before the grove of trees that resembled a woman. The natural life around it had blossomed with beautiful flowers, dancing grass, and even incredible wildlife. After the fire that wiped out its greenery, Renaissance Island had become the home to new birds and winged creatures due to its vibrant nature and mostly lack of human intervention. Even Damien smelled like nature to them, allowing for a peaceful coexistence. Damien took a few steps forward and gently touched the arboreal portrait. A familial warmth. "One day I will bring you back," he muttered. He felt the grass under his feet dance as the flower sang under the gentle breeze. Damien's thought process was interrupted as a blue bird flew to a small nest resting on the tree right above him. The bird seemed to feed a worm to its nestling, but this is not where Damien's attention ended up. For he saw a collection of juicy green strawberries. However, there was an impostor amongst them. Damien took a subconscious breath as he had an inkling as to what the odd fruit could be. Whiz! The air whistled as the 14-year-old boy's body flickered from the ground and onto the thick branches of the tree, the special strawberry right before him. Damien slowly plucked the fruit, it was only the size of his palm. Fruit image, in Discord. Following that, a blue screen appeared in Damien's mind. Equals dash equals dash, dash 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 equals dash equals. Human fruit, mythical model, dryad. Zoan fruit. Fruit rating, 6.5 stars. Allows the user to transform into a hybrid and full dryad at will. Expanded, grants immunity to all maladies while greatly increasing lifespan, body functions, and overall bodily capabilities. Also allows the user to control and converse with nature. Equals dash dash, dash 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 equals. Sybil had generated a fruit classification model, rating a devil fruit out of 7 stars. In which a 7-star fruit could be considered an ultimate class devil fruit ability. Even Damien's pulverization fruit was only scaled at 6.5 stars. Damien absently played around with the strawberry as he went over the devil fruit. Indeed, it was consistent with his mother's powers. From what he could see, Nadia could transform into a dryad and control nature. Whereas Damien got a great boost to his bodily capabilities and to converse with nature. If anything, Damien could be considered as a once-in-a-century anomaly. He stared at the fruit and eventually decided something. It's time to venture out, he decided. Gambino family alongside some recon. Damien then promptly stored the fruit in his storage space alongside the universal pose, map of surroundings, and fruit ability transfer tokens. Near the docks. Though my sailing abilities are almost null, it really couldn't be that bad, right? Damien thought. He was in the West Blue. Abrupt weather changes were quite rare and the general climate was predictable. With the maps he found nearly 7 years ago, he could simply sail southeast to reach the nearest inhabited island, Greta Island. Damien uttered some simple tunes as he walked around the blazing pirate's ship, hopping over the shattered floor and shredded bow. A rather odd thing in the front deck was the 2 humanoid bodies wrapped in large, green leaves. Though they were wastes, I could use the extra cash, Damien muttered at the well-preserved bodies of Pabulum and Ignis. The 5-meter-long leaves were from the thriving elephant trees. They had strong preservative properties, credit to Damien's natural conscience for finding them. The sails unfurled with a heavy swatting sound as Damien pulled up the anchor. Phew! It was quick to catch the wind, enabling the vessel to move. Naturally, Damien had no sailing or navigating experience, but he had seen some pirate movies to understand some surface knowledge. And, set sail. Greta Island, West Blue. 3 days later. Greta Island was around 10,400 square kilometers in area, located near the center of West Blue. It boasted a population of around 1.3 million inhabitants, and was a member of the world government, having its own marine base, the 111th branch base of the Navy. A marine captain reigning over said base. The island had 4 main docks in each cardinal direction. The northern dock was for more merchant ships, with the marine base being set near it. The western dock and eastern dock were both for commercial travel, while the southern dock was for the general public. Southern docks. All right, back it up, now. Watch your step. Welcome home. The dock had quite a few people walking about, around 200 of them. Mostly citizens returning home from a trip. There were a few marines posted near the side, overseeing the entire establishment. A few cannons were mounted at 3 strategically placed towers. Ha! My eyes are surely playing tricks on me, must be the long hours cause that almost looks like a pirate ship, a man joked in an unsure tone. His eyes locked on a faraway vessel. Another man nearby had the same inclination, let's wait till the sails are fully visible. A few worried citizens diverted their attention as well as the ship neared. It's a pirate ship, no doubt about it. That Jolly Roger, it's the blazing pirates. What the hell is that crazy pirate doing here? Doesn't he know Greta Island has a marine base? Naturally, the citizens were shaken by the pirate flag. Asterisk click click. A few Marines loaded their muskets, aiming at the coming ship, ready to fire. This is Marine Lieutenant Wat A. Bottle, I have confirmed a pirate ship at the western docks, requesting backup, a higher-ranked Marine reported into his transponder snail. Ready to fire, Lieutenant. Their exchange forced a heavy atmosphere onto the docks. Some civilians gasped, covering their mouths while others slowly retreated. The previously calm air had warped into a tense gust. However, just as the mounted cannon was about to open fire, they saw a white blanket being draped onto the bow of the ship. A white blanket, the Marine commanded as his subordinate pulled out his 4X binoculars. Check who's on board. Lieutenant, you're not gonna believe this. What is it? Did that Ignis surrender? The Marine shook his head in reply, quite taken aback by the turn of events. No. It's an empty ship, there's just a single young lad on the ship. And 2 bodies wrapped up in leaves. The lieutenant who was ready to put his life on the line paused in his footsteps. Hi! Creak! Splash! The withered pirate ship eventually docked as the sails were furled up and an anchor was dropped, slamming onto the floorboards of the dock rather haphazardly. Gulp! The citizens gulped in unison as they saw a young, though relatively tall, boy walk off the board with little worry, 2 bodies being dragged by either hand. Naturally, it was Damien, donning his beloved regal attire. Damien nodded at the group of people and nodded in greeting, "Yo, you guys got my money for these 2. Slam! He dropped the pair of bodies right in front of the lieutenant who was still gathering his thoughts. You young man, are you by any chance a bounty hunter?" he questioned. Damien blinked for a second and shrugged, "Something like that. I'm here to turn these 2 pieces of trash in." The Marines turned to look at each other, unsure of how to direct the young teen. "Ahem, well, just follow me, I'll take you to our base and proceed with your request there." Damien just nodded, dragging the corpses once more. "He's dragging those 2 with such ease, Ignis is a big guy too, what kind of strength is that? Reminds me of my youth." "Shut up, last I remember you couldn't even do a push-up at that age." 111th Branch Base. 15 minutes later. "Let me get this right, you took down the entire Blazing Pirates crew and want to turn in Blazing Axe Ignis, and Green Fox Pabulum," the Marine asked Damien. They were inside the Marine base. It was a rather large lobby with a series of counters lining up people for proceedings. Bright tube lights placed along the ceiling to brighten up the room. At this time, everyone's attention was on the strong 8-footer teenager who was effortlessly holding up 2 grown men by their cold, dead heads. "That's right, and can you hurry up?" Damien replied. The Marine slowly nodded, "Oh, of course. I will ask my superior to process you as I cannot give out so much cash." Damien shrugged as he threw the 2 pirates onto the red-draped carpets. "Here's some tea," a worker in his 30s offered to Damien. The young teen sat on the comfortable sofa, enjoying some tea, looking out the glass windows and toward the green forests. "Hey, who's coming to process me, by the way?" Damien asked the worker. He promptly replied, "It should be the Captain Marine here." Damien's eyes then sharpened as he gazed at the man before him. A few seconds later, he asked in a slow yet powerful voice, "This Marine captain? Was he here 7 years ago too?" The worker gulped heavily as his back felt cold under Damien's sharp eyes, though answering his question nonetheless. "And no, the previous Marine captain died under the siege of the Gambino Mafia family a few years ago, sir." Damien's eyebrow suddenly twitched. The man who was paid off by the Blazing Pirates to effortlessly sail through their jurisdiction and toward Damien's home island died in the hands of the Mafia. Ra-ha-ha-ha. Damien unconsciously laughed, his hands covering his face. How ironic. A certain anger and reluctance bloomed in his heart from being unable to punish the man with his own hands. The maddened laughter left the worker greatly panicked as he scurried off post-haste. Damien shook his head with a sigh, though a shadow suddenly was cast upon him. "I am Captain Raiden presiding over this Marine branch, are you the one who came to turn in the Blazing Pirates' bounties?" Damien gazed to the side and saw the 8-foot-tall man who had appeared. He wore a black t-shirt and grey trousers with a marine coat draped over his shoulder, decorated with golden cuffs. He had a buzz cut and a few scars on his face. "Raiden Image, in Discord." "That's right," Damien simply nodded. The Marine squinted his eyes and slowly nodded. He didn't seem to believe that Damien had taken down the 2 pirates, but it didn't matter as long as the scum were dead. Since Damien brought them in, he was within his rights to cash in the bounty. But there was a little problem. "Young man, I have a little advice I suggest you follow," Raiden said with his deep voice. He then gestured his hands to the Marines nearby as they immediately left the main lobby. Leaving the 2 alone. Damien narrowed his eyes and hummed as if telling the Marine to elaborate. "Those 2 are aligned under the Gambino Mafia family," Raiden informed with a hint of worry. "If you cash in their bounty, the scum of the Mafia will be alerted right away and they will come to hunt you down." Damien slowly nodded, appreciating the man's concern. He beamed a smile, "Thank you for the warning, but I still want to cash it in." Raiden closed his eyes with a slight sigh. Very well, then what do you think of being a marine? With this, I can protect you from their claws. Damien eyed the rather kind marine and stood up in recognition of it. I appreciate your words, Captain Raiden. But being a marine is not for me. Raiden eyed the young man who was a little taller than him and gave a dull sigh once more. I see, well, think it through, you're still young. Don't think of yourself as immortal. The marine took one last look at the corpses and said, I'll have some men ready the cash immediately. Damien nodded with a slight smile. A little while later. Slam. A large chest was soon placed before Damien by the hard work of 2 marines. Green Fox Pabulum, 12.9 million berries. Blazing Axe Ignis, 39 million berries. For a total bounty of 51.9 million berries, including an 8% income tax, that comes down to a grand total of 47.748 million berries. Damien blinked. Hey, what with the income tax, you might as well put up a Jolly Roger and say you're robbing me, he complained. The marine scratched his head. Sorry, lad, but all legal income under the world government is taxed, including bounties. Any hints of tax evasion or fraud will get you hunted down by the relentless Revenue and Taxation Bureau. The soldier shook his head in dismay. Those guys are like bloodhounds, worse than any pirate out there if you ask me. Damien's lips twitched. Seems like bloodthirsty governments are a universal thing. He gave up and left with the chest of berries. The exit door creaked as Damien walked out with an empty chest. Naturally, he moved the cash into his inventory right away as only an idiot would keep so much cash in hand. Damien picked up a brochure and walked towards the main town of Greta Island through a stone road surrounded by trees. He continued at a stable pace under the warm sunlight, the occasional breeze making his hair fly wildly. Though his mind was elsewhere. Captain Raiden was a fairly nice guy. Though he looked rough, he did mean well for Damien. This also did wake the young teen up. He had a prejudice against the world government and the navy from his memories, but the truth is far from that. The Marines were, for the most part, the good guys. It was the top brass who were the mainly corrupt ones, not even considering the celestial dragons at the very top. Outside of corruption, the navy could be seen as evil by some simply because of one main point, their purpose. They were the sword of the world government, their duty was to maintain the authority of the 5 elders and the celestial dragons. They may wear justice on their backs, but that justice comes in many forms. Becoming a marine wasn't a bad idea. With Damien's strength, he could surely reach a high rank, even an admiral. After all, you didn't need a just heart to reach the top. Unfortunately, though I could probably grow fast through the Marines, it would be risky, he said as he shook his head. With this hellish rocks era, Marines dying and recruits being pushed to the front are simply innumerable. I'd probably die by showing too much potential. And showing too little strength would restrict my growth. Damien suddenly stopped in his path. The grass and trees had just alerted him of some rats crawling about. Thwonk. The empty chest fell to the ground. You might as well come out now, you work for the Gambino family, no? And soon 20 men walked out from all directions. Lulu la la la. That's right kid, you annoyed the wrong people. Ready to die? I'll take that cash as some extra commission too. Crack. Damien cracked his knuckles with a small smile. I didn't think I'd have such a graceful welcome to my first outing ever. I hope you can answer a few of my questions once we're done. The raiders simply laughed at the words as they grinned in a manner they probably thought was considered frightening. The news leaked faster than I thought. Nice, Damien thought. The men then began a not-so-teamwork approach to attack him, thinking the death of Ignis was simply luck. Damien had no intention of acting weak, or like some certain genres of fiction would say, a tiger pretending to be a pig. He simply exhaled a heavy breath as a certain burst of power spread in all directions. Obliteration pulse. It was an omnidirectional attack that rippled its way through the entire clearing and into the bushes around him. Crack. The ground was riddled with tears as the trees shattered into fragments. Wah dash. The crimson burst of energy tore right through the masses as they exploded into 3 centimeters cubes, blood following in their wake. The air continued to screech and howl as the attack neared its end, deliberately leaving all but one survivor. Are you ready to speak? Damien asked the shocked and frightened man. Drib. Damien then scowled as he saw some unsightly liquid drop from the man's trousers. Monsant dash. The man attempted to run for his life and yet he slipped in his urine and fell into the yellow pool that only seemed to grow in volume. Damien slowly walked forward and in front of the shivering man. All right, tell me about who sent you here, he said. Gulp. The raider furiously nodded, his desire to live made him rather cooperative. The Gambino family got news on their dogs being cashed in and wanted you dead, he said in a quivering tone. Let me go now. Damien hummed at the info and questioned further, I know that little. Where is their main base located? They kill me if I tell you. The red-eyed youth simply raised his hand. Grr. A dazzling red energy appeared in the boy's palm as the air cried out in return. The bright sun seemed to fade away as the raider's eyes saw the volatile energy swarm his attacker's hand. It's at El Paver Island. Seeing that Damien's power had not retreated, the man continued, that place is swamped with their mobsters and even pirates for hire, you're safer anywhere else. Damien nodded at the last bit of information but felt no threat from it. Wait, Don Dash. The man was directed into innumerable pieces as Damien returned to his journey to Greta Island, now looking for a more detailed map of El Paver Island. Captain Raiden, what happened here? A younger marine asked, obviously a new recruit. The 8-foot-tall man he spoke with was also surprised. Looks like that young man wasn't lying about Ignis, the marine muttered. I hope you won't butt heads with the mafia, it would be a waste for such a young lad to die in this small sea. 2 hours later. The red-eyed youth walked through the stone roads within the main town of Greta Island. There was a faint smell of seawater lingering about as it was located near the ocean. It was a fairly clean place with colorful banners decorating the houses and buildings. Kids running about, adults busy with their work. Damien spent a while just soaking in the atmosphere of civilization. He had spent the past 7 years on his own. Seeing, hearing and even conversing with humans was refreshing. Though he had resolved himself to reach the greatest of heights, he didn't want to become some emotionless robot. It's been 14 years since I ate ice cream, he smiled while devouring some vanilla-like ice cream. He then unfurled a large piece of paper that was filled with pictures of islands and points of interest in the west blew a map. Damien continued to lick his ice cream as he located El Paver Island. It was further south from Greta Island, a minimal journey of around 2 weeks by ship. Naturally, this was the route for normal people, adjusted to travel within marine jurisdictions to avoid any pesky pirates. The shortest distance was more of an 8-day trip. Damien was fairly confident in taking down the Gambino family. He recalled that Capone Gang Beeg was able to dominate the mafia families before raising his flag and becoming a pirate. If a Beeg of that level could reach the top of West Blue, then naturally Damien could take down a single family alone. He also wanted to get some actual combat experience, solo practice could only go so far. Only by putting your life on the line can you truly blossom in strength. Damien suddenly woke up from his thoughts as he saw some letter in the newspaper held up by a middle-aged man sitting not so far away, enjoying a cup of tea. The bolded subheading read, Rox strikes again. Damien read the description without difficulty, suffice to say his vision was quite impeccable. That's it. The problem was that the entire story wasn't even on the cover. Not only that, it barely spanned a half page. Simply stating that the Rox pirates had attacked a kingdom in the New World and left it ablaze. No names were given, it was simply a hollow report that focused on showcasing the Rox as a group of devils without giving much information to any single individual. I thought the news of the Rox was erased only after his death, but it seems even now the general public only see them as some reckless fools in the New World, Damien surmised. His eyes then glanced at the news distributor. World News Agency. Damien scoffed in return, no wonder, the entire news is under world government control. Unlike in Luffy's time when Morgans controlled the news, it seemed that the World News Economy Journal simply did not yet exist and everything was under the 5 elders' thumbs. Whoever controls the media, controls the mind, Damien muttered as he shook his head and got up. Splash! The water burst apart as the anchor was pulled up. It was a rather pristine yet small ship that Damien had purchased for 10 million berries. The sail was unfurled as Damien set off towards the south. Bam! The table groaned as it was put under great pressure. Damien gazed at the tower of books before him, courtesy of Greta Island Public Library. He had borrowed some tens of books for his own knowledge. It was a simple thought. Damien wanted to soak in as much information and data about this world as he could. Though the academic side of things of the One Piece world was rather primitive from Earth, he focused more on the history and geography of the seas. Whether it was about the weather and its random changes, the types of sea kings in the oceans, the types of poisons found in what animals, or the countless animals and plants that were known. Even the diseases of the world were important to know of. The history aspect includes the kingdoms under the world government, previous wars and battles, the big names of the seas and finally and most importantly, the history behind the world government itself. Though the information available was surely heavily censored and even altered, only a fool would sail the endless seas without having basic knowledge of what to expect. Damien had always been studious and used the free time available during his longer voyage to soak in the needed information. Boons of having a strong memory, otherwise I'd be slamming my head on the wall trying to memorize all this stuff, he thought before setting sail. 9 days later. A lonely ship docked at the eastern side of El Paver Island. A large garrison of mobsters naturally surrounded the area beyond the lonesome ship. There were a few hundred men dressed in rather well-fitted black suits. A small cloud of smoke covered the island and 95% of the mobsters were perpetually smoking. Click. Hundreds of guns were loaded as they pointed at the rather empty ship. Be careful, the attacker was able to ward off all cannon fire, most likely an ability user, an aged gangster said as he sucked his cigar. The armed personnel then saw a single person stand at the bow of the ship, the morning sun masking their appearance. A few men gulped as they were enveloped in the shadow cast onto them. Open fire! Open fire! Bang, bang, bang! Hundreds of guns fired out an endless sea of bullets towards the pristine ship at the docks. The wooden bow was riddled with craters as it creaked and shattered apart. A soft whistle blew out as the black shadow on board whizzed in disappearance. The same strong 8-foot-tall silhouette reappeared behind the senior mafia member. Before the man could even react, his head had exploded from a punch. Bang, bang, bang! The gangsters quickly shifted their aim onto the young attacker but were surprised by the results. Every projectile that was traveling faster than sound was immediately stopped as if meeting an immovable object. Going from a sturdy bullet shape to folding into a pancake, letting onto the ground with a melodious clatter. A monster! Seeing their attacks bear no fruits, some more senior members drew their blades and rushed forth. Damien smiled in return and shot towards them, ready to practice. He abandoned his devil fruit temporarily and stuck to hand combat. The punches came flying in with slashes of the blades as he worked on his reflexes and response time. Slash! A sharp sword slashed toward the boy and he returned his right elbow directly at it. Bam! The blade didn't cut fully in. How hard is his skin, the man cried out as he saw his bent knife. Only a few drops of blood dribbled from the young man. My skin can mostly block bullets, and even bend blades, but not completely, Damien complimented his beastly vitality. The bullets came raining down as they left tiny depressions in his skin, though they failed to dig any deeper before being deformed. Crack! Damien's elbow crashed on a man's neck from above as his head plunged into the dirt below, surely broken. Die! A man with a minigun screamed as he unloaded a spray of bullets. Whiz! Rat-a-tat-a-ta! The young man simply flickered away as the bullets met some friendlies, dropping them like flies. Watch the crossfire dash! The man couldn't finish his sentence as a strong chop smacked his neck and sent him into instant paralysis. Minutes passed as the hundreds of men were massacred. He's too fast, we gotta report it to the boss. A 10-foot-tall, 3.05 m, man gazed at the battlefield hundreds of meters away, a binocular at hand. You see that? He asked his younger companion who also had binoculars. Looks young, very young, the man commented. His moves are a little choppy and full of openings, but carry great power. He's purposely not using his devil fruit abilities. Not just that, the older man gulped. He's sharpening himself with every kill, he's treating us like whetstones. The other man clenched his fist in anger, we're feared all over West Blue, just to be used by a boy to train himself. The grumbling man soon froze as he unconsciously gulped. His binoculars fell to the ground, he saw us. Damien who was just about to finish his last enemies felt peering eyes from afar. A few black silhouettes watching, the sunlight reflecting off their tools. Better to attack them quickly before they can organize themselves, there should be a treasury filled with some goodies too, right? Damien broke the neck of the last man as his body fell. My combat capabilities are growing quite fast, unnaturally fast, he thought while rushing towards the main base of the Gambino family. Main base of the Gambino family. A 16-foot-tall, 4.88 m, man sat on an equally large golden chair. He was towering in not just his height but also his demeanor, the scars on his face and body alongside the gun wounds painted quite the picture. The middle-aged man had a thin mustache and well-combed hair as he sat with a pistol in his hand. His image, in Discord. A transponder snail sat on the table in front of him as he puffed out an annoyed cloud of smoke. Boss, the snail cried in a human-like expression. He's too strong, the entire Eastern forces have been taken out. The mafia boss bit on his cigar and he spat out, how many are there? The snail replied post-haste, just one. He's making his way to the main base, boss. The man hung up the snail as he grumbled in anger. His name was Gambino Delago, the head of the Gambino mafia family. Delago waved at his butler and ordered, round up all our men to hold down this threat, I want him dead. The old man nodded. Show him the might of the Gambino family. Raise M to the ground. For the boss. Thousands of men in tight-fitted suits stood with their guns and weapons ready. Even some cannons and RPGs were set to aim in the direction of the attacker. The wall that surrounded the entire base was made with 5 feet thick concrete, mounted with watchtowers and snipers. We have the target in sight, a sniper said as he peered into his scope, lining the crosshairs to the invader. Take him down. Bang. The bolt-action rifle recoiled, shooting the bullet at great speeds. Boom. The ground exploded and a small crater was left behind, though the attacker was nowhere to be seen. I missed. The sniper then heard a calm voice resound in the area. Utter ruin. A huge current of crimson energy exploded from under the sniper as the thick walls were obliterated to their simplest form, dust and debris. Cuboid pebbles rained over the entire base as the men standing by were engulfed by the cloud of dust. Whoosh! Suddenly a black shadow whizzed through the dust and into the horde of men. Explosions went off, trigger-happy gangsters unloaded their firearms haphazardly as their numbers steeply declined. Damien continued his hand-to-hand combat as he broke bones, limbs, and necks, thinning the crowd. Shots went off and yet Damien was able to dodge them instinctively. "Fire the cannons," a booming voice spread out of the snail in the main watchtower. "But boss," the chief executive cried out miserably, "it'll hit our own men. Fire the damn cannons!" Boom! The heavy barrel of the iron cannon exhaled a cloud of smoke as the cannonballs rained down on the panicked crowd. Boom! 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 The explosions roared continuously as the cannons opened fire without pause, finally reaching a slow silence. "Did we get him?" a man uttered from the walls on the other side as his hands shook in fear. Above. A black shadow flickered into the sky as the red eyes seemed to shine through the dust cloud, staring into the man's soul. Obliteration pulse. A huge burst of crimson energy followed by an omnidirectional attack ensued as it engulfed the entirety of the plaza. It kept spanning, from meters to tens of meters, reaching 100 meters. A huge crater appeared, left with sharp cuts and scars on the earth within it. Blood dyed the ground a fresh red as the walls crumbled to dust, destroying nearly 80% of the entire Gambino family defense force. Damien nodded at the impact while breathing a heavy breath and continued into the mafia compound. He roamed through the well-lit halls and a trail of goons followed in his wake. Crash! The thick iron doors exploded as Damien made his way into the boss chambers. He saw expensive lights that lit up the regal decorations and animal heads mounted on the walls of rare species. It was quite the room filled with golden delights. Damien looked ahead and saw the man in the large chair, devouring 2 cigarettes together. He was surrounded by tens of bodyguards in black suits, and dark sunglasses equipped like the Secret Service. Guns were drawn as usual. "Just a kid doing this much damage," Delago said in an annoyed tone. "What will the other 4 think of me when they hear about this?" He then gazed at the regal attire Damien was wearing. "Why don't you work under me, kid?" he offered with a thin smirk. "I'll give you money, women, whatever." What'd you say?" Damien hummed at the offer with a smile while he thought in his mind, "Sybil, pull up his stats. Equals dash equals dash, dash 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 equals dash equals." Gambino Delago. Age, 52 years, 5 months. Height, 16, 4.88 m. Status, healthy, enraged. Strength, unknown. Devil fruit, unknown. Equals dash dash, dash 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 equals. Naturally, Damien hadn't seen Delago fight and had no info on his devil fruit, or the lack of it, thus the information of the stats was rather restricted. "I refuse." Delago crushed both his cigars and scoffed. Bang, bang, bang. Shots rained at Damien who just stood to eat them. Clatter. The bullets littered the floor as the men continued to unload their entire magazine without mercy. Damien had begun to tire and instead of dodging, chose to take the regular bullets which caused small wounds, but that was it. Squirm. The ripped flesh soon reformed as the jacket he wore seemed to become alive, patching its many holes. "What the hell?" the men gulped as they saw the result. The red-eyed boy raised his hand and shot out a current of energy that decimated the entire room. Screams followed by a sudden silence as the dust settled. Damien glanced at the dead bodyguards but raised an eyebrow in return. Delago seemed to flicker outside of the range of the attack, slowly ripping his shirt off to show the scarred yet muscular chest. "Don't be too cocky, brat. Shave." The man whizzed from his location and appeared behind Damien. Penetrating finger pistol. Delago's fingers popped with veins as 4 bursts of air shot forth into the young invader's position. A similar scene broke out as Damien flashed away from the attack and rolled to safety. Boom! An explosion resounded in the torn-down room as 4 deep craters were left on the ground. They dug beyond the floor and unknowingly deep down. A thin cloud of dust floated out from the gashes, reflecting the sheer power of the attack. "Navy's Rokushiki." Damien muttered as he saw Delago's moves. "Delalala. You can use shave too, not bad," the mafia boss laughed. "It took me quite a lot of time to get my hands on the Rokushiki manual." Damien glanced at the 4 craters, they seemed to cause damage beyond his expectations. The mobster grinned, "Your youth won't guarantee you immortality, kid, now die." Delago then pointed both hands towards Damien. Penetration fever. Damien's eyes widened as he saw the bullet-like attacks shoot at his body, even faster than he could react. Splash! He was able to dodge most but 3 of the shots reached his chest and right arm as they went right through his skin and even showed bone. Damien groaned as he touched his wounds, "It went through my skin." Devil fruit ability paired with Rokushiki, Damien concluded as the flesh slowly began to heal, but it would take at least an hour to fully remedy. The mobster grinned with a hidden surprise. What kind of monstrous endurance ya got, kid? My penetration fruit ability should have gone right through you. It seems you hid the fruit power from the media, there's no news of it, Damien said as he stood in a ready stance. The mobster didn't reply as he pointed his hand at Damien once more. I want to see how long you can stand, boy. He was about to shoot but Damien was faster. Slam. The boy's foot slammed on the ground and the entire floor was colored in a red checkered pattern. Delago's eyes widened as he felt his balance give out. The entire floor exploded into countless pieces of debris as the two fell into the abyss below. Thud. Delago's 16-foot-tall frame crashed on the ground. He hurriedly stood up and saw his surroundings. It was the basement level used to torture prisoners, the catacombs. Some broken pillars lined the dark and damp surroundings as dust continued to rain down. Cobwebs scoured the edges, showcasing the decrepit spirit of the chamber. Delago then turned to the side as he felt his back go cold. Ugh, his back creaked as the spine seemed to bend from the kick from behind, launching the towering man into the pillars before him. His body crashed through the obstacles and into the old stone walls. Damien stood, blood dribbling from his chest as he squinted his eyes. I used my pulverization on that kick and he was able to take it. Iron body, is it? Rumble. The crashed man stood up in renewed vigor, blood pouring from his mouth as his back was extremely bruised and had turned purple. Damn it, he roared out as his body ached. He then responded with an attack of his own, picking up an assault rifle that was on the ground. Unholy penetration barrage. The rifle shot out bullets far faster than they should have been fired at, surrounded by a bubble of white energy as they blasted their way toward Damien. The bullets continued to rain down as Damien jumped to cover behind a large heap of broken pillars. Each projectile left 5-inch-wide craters, digging equally deeper. The voluminous amounts of dust showed the depth of the attacks, enough to strike fear in the normal man. My range needs work, Damien thought as he felt the pillars behind him explode from the flurry of attacks. His stamina began to bottom as he felt a thrill of death. A smile broke out on the young invader's face as he felt a few fruit-enhanced bullets making it through and nailing him in the back. This feeling. Damien closed his eyes as his mind felt a new sense. He ignored the pulsating pain from the increasing amounts of wounds across his back, opting to focus on the blooming sense. The sounds of Delago's attacks faded out as Damien's attention spanned all over the nearby area. Pitter-patter. A few drops of water fell to the ground near the corner of the basement from a leaky pipe. Flutter. A few panicked flies swarmed about from the onslaught of the constant explosions. Squeak. Rats hiding in the corners of the room, trying to stay in the cold and wet edges, away from Delago. Lube-dub. Damien even heard the beating hearts of some lucky mafia members as they scurried away from the main base. Huff. He then felt the heavy breathing of the wounded Delago who continued his barrage of attacks. Damien's eyes opened as the newfound sense expanded through the dark room. He stood up with little worry and turned to Delago. Giving yourself up? Very good, die. The man unloaded the hundreds of penetration rounds onto Damien with a crazy grin. Damien took a deep breath and let his body move on his own. Delago's eyes widened as he saw Damien's body dance through the barrage of bullets, bending and twisting in perfect angles to dodge the hail of bullets. Such fluid movements continued without end as the young man slowly walked ahead, his body dodging every single bullet with ease. Delago gulped and roared out, impossible. Damien now stood a meter from Delago as his hand shot out to grab the gun in the mobster's hand. A sound of pixelation boomed through the damp halls as the firearm exploded into tiny metallic pieces, even the bullets had been crushed into tiny cubic pieces. Delago's eyes widened in pain as Damien's left foot slammed onto his knee, bending it to an unnatural degree, and causing him to fall to his knees. Damien's hand grabbed him by the throat, his eyes gleaming with confidence. I thank you for boosting my strength, he said. Delago's breathing hastened as he felt the shadow of death envelop him. Why are you doing this? Just to train yourself. Damien saw the madness fill the man's eyes as he replied in an emotionless tone. You killed my mom. Delago frantically waved his hands, trying to buy himself some time. Wait, you mean from Rendition Island? Renaissance. Delago nodded like a chicken pecking rice. Right. I just did what I was told, it wasn't my doing. Damien's eyes narrowed into the desperate man's face. What do you mean? Delago started tweeting like a bird, telling everything he knew. It happened 8 years ago, this man came to our family and almost killed us all. He gave us a chance to live by raiding a small, no-name island and so we did. I swear. The rainbow fish was just an excuse to calm the marine base down so they'd accept the bribe more easily, it really wasn't my fault. Who told you to do it? Damien questioned with an icy tone. Delago gulped. I never saw his face. Damien scanned his eyes with his newfound observation, not feeling any hints of a lie. Crumble. Nuoyag. The red energy shot out from the young man's palm and into the mafia boss body and entire system. His nerves were overloaded as his eyes popped out of their sockets from the impact. Splatter! His body shook and eventually exploded like a grape as Damien stepped out of the bloody shower. The strong metallic smell of blood pervaded the atmosphere, leaving a silent Damien pondering with a complicated expression. So close to avenging his mother and yet so far. It was 7 years ago when Damien felt the pain of losing a loved one. It ate his soul at the start, and yet he was able to bury it under the guise of training and growth. That anger and hatred were bottled up and placed to the side. He used the excuse of training himself to haphazardly raid the Gambino family. There weren't many backup plans in place, he simply attacked with great offense and was able to break right into their core, even facing their leader. It was a reckless attack that fortunately bore fruits, but the reality was that his bottled-up anger had burst out after 7 years and he wanted to kill the man behind his mother's death. Unfortunately, things did not turn out as black and white as he had hoped. An unknown variable. He could have been lying, came a thought from Sybil. Maybe, or maybe there was someone who wanted my home island laid to waste, but who? The world government. He shook his head, opting to take upon more immediate concerns. Damien's red pupils stared at the puddle of red littered with the pieces of flesh that were once the great head of one of the 5 families of the West. He slowly stabilized his breathing and thought over the battle. His body ached with the deep holes over his back and chest from Delago's attacks. It was his first clash with another fruit user and he was certainly caught off guard. The cakewalk he expected was surely wrong. Tui, he spat out a wad of blood as his bones creaked from his stretching. I need to be more careful next time, he told himself. But it seems I did get quite the reward for my recklessness. Damien expanded his mind like before and felt the same feeling. It was like a new sense beyond his body that could capture the surroundings in great detail. Every slight movement, even if it was an insect, was caught under this perception. It was a sixth sense. Is this observation hacky? He muttered, rightfully so. Yes, Damien. Hacky tends to bloom in times of great conflict and in the heat of battle, congratulations. Damien nodded at Sybil's comments. Why does it feel so familiar? It was odd, there was an air of familiarity with this supposed sixth sense. Hacky is found in all living things, this is true in every single world. Even in your previous life. Damien remained silent, allowing Sybil to continue. The laws of reality, or what your people called the laws of physics, binds natural order. Though it was far tighter on your Earth, they were still there. Observation hacky is the easiest to awaken as it appears throughout random times of life. What do you mean? She answered immediately, like when you feel someone watching you from afar, and you turn around and someone was indeed watching you. Or when you feel something will happen and it does. All these are some of those random times observation hacky appears. Even the advanced application of future sight occurs in what I believe your scientists call déjà vu. It's just an instinct that can be so much more. She closed off by saying, however, to awaken it at 14 years of age is quite rare. It seems you have a talent for observation hacky passed down from my parents, Damien finished the sentence. Well anyways, let's go find the treasury. Elsewhere in West Blue. What do you mean El Paver Island is in shambles? Someone attacked that Delago guy. Send men over and grab their entire chain of power before the other families get to it first. Similar orders rang out throughout the underworld of the West Blue as the entire sea was shaken. Naturally, these words reached the ears of the Marines as well. 10 minutes later. Gambino family treasure chamber. Damien glanced at the piles of gold and banknotes that decorated the room. The golden hue was bright enough to make any man greedy for money. But what Damien's eyes were glued to were the items on the pedestal at the center of the room. He saw a jug of liquid, a book, a sword, and 3 devil fruits. The jugs were that of alcohol, finely aged and considered quite expensive. He then picked up the book and smiled at the title which read, Rokushiki Manual. It was a complete guide to train in the 6 Navy styles of the following. 1 Soru, shave. 2 Jeppo, moonwalk. 3 Shiken, finger pistol. 4 Tekai, iron body. 5 Rankyaku, tempest kick. 6 Kamii, paper body. A/N, they will be referred to in their English names beyond this. Nice stuff, I guess Delago wasn't lying about having found the manual, Damien said. Though his attention was diverted elsewhere. It was a dark-colored sword in the shape of a katana. A purple electricity pattern was printed on its blade. Looking closely, the blade seemed to pulse as if it were alive. Damien glanced at the name card placed on the pedestal that stood out from the dull and dusty surroundings. One of the 21 great swords, Churn. The blade graced the world with its majesty with a swish of the air. A beautiful blade, but unfortunately I have no affinity for swords, he muttered as he sheathed the blade. Damien was not averse to getting a weapon to further use his power, but he would need a heavier and larger weapon to properly use it with his devil fruit. Much like how Whitebeard used his glaive to concentrate his quake attacks. Such a thin blade focuses more on sharp and quick slashes than what Damien can use in tandem with his abilities. Plus, he was no swordsman. He then eyed the 3 rather blaring devil fruits at the heart of the treasury. Damien had allowed Sybil to intake the devil fruit encyclopedia to identify what she could. It didn't take long for 3 fruit details to pop up in his mind. The first 2 were paramecia devil fruits. Kilo fruit allows the user to change their weight from 1 to 10,000 kilograms without, in any way, affecting the overall size of their bodies, making them a mass-manipulating human. Glue fruit allows the user to secrete glue from their pores, making them a glue human. But what made Damien's eyes sparkle was the next devil fruit. Ice fruit allows the user to create, control, and transform into ice at will, turning them into a freezing human. Gulp. Damien had to take a subconscious gulp as he picked up the blue devil fruit. It was a powerful Logia fruit, one of the absolute strongest Logia, at that. Future power of Admiral Aokiji, aka Kuzan. Why is it here? Last I recall from my hobby of digging at the lore, Kuzan was from the South Blue, Damien muttered. Perhaps a rather fruitful exchange of gold between the Mafia and other parties? Or recovered by a young Kuzan. With the ability to effectively overrule the greatest weakness of devil fruit users, water, this fruit could be considered overpowered. Damien shook himself out of his lost state and thought for a second, Sybil, what would happen if I used the fruit ability transfer token on this? Sybil replied, as the token can only translate auxiliary powers, I'd say it would give you a Logia ice body but that would be it. You will not get anything more. Damien gave a disappointed sigh. Though a Logia body would be great, it would lose most usage against anyone with decent armament haki. Perhaps only auxiliary fruits by nature can be transferred completely, he just needed to find 3 that would fit that bill. Damien decisively stored all the treasures alongside the Rokushiki manual, churn, and the fruits in his inventory and whizzed to the top floor. They are coming. It was the sound of the grass that carried the thoughts of the trees by the edge of the island. Supposedly a large fleet of pirates and mafia members were about to arrive. Damien didn't have much energy to fight them all, so he naturally chose to retreat. 10 minutes later, Damien reached the edge of the island that was away from the raiding troops, credit to the nature that led him here. It was an abandoned dock with an old ship there for emergency evacuation. Naturally, Damien would borrow it indefinitely. He unfurled the sails and set out as the island was slowly crowded by thousands of mafia agents. The once calm El Paver Island turned into a hot potato in the hands of other top forces. There were people from the underground, pirates, undercover marines, reporters, you name it, they were there. The other 4 families had arrived as well. El Paver Island would surely become a mosh pit of battle. The vacuum of power was not a peaceful void to fill. Marine Ford, Grand Line. Gambino family in ruins, a powerful voice boomed in a spacious office within the core of Marine supremacy. An admiral's office. Admiral, should we send men to settle the carnage? A rear admiral respectfully questioned. Never mind that, let those vultures fight it out, it doesn't concern us. The man in the full brown suit waved his hand. He then glanced at the picture of a young man that had been faxed to his office. This boy was responsible for it. Where'd he come from? The overpowering man questioned. The marine in front of him shook a little and responded, he turned in a bounty of around 50 million berries not too long ago. The name recorded by regulation was Einar D. Damien. The admiral's eyes widened as his hand clenched into a fist, release out a bounty immediately. The rear admiral was caught off guard as he asked, a bounty? Should we not try and recruit such a powerful young lad? All he did was kill some scum of the underworld. The admiral scoffed, banging his fist onto his desk, the D are an unruly people. There's no point, rather it's best to nip them in the bud. On an island in the Grand Line. Puru, 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 Puru. Puru, 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 Puru. A transponder snail transmitted a call under the darkness of the room. What is it? A growling voice boomed in question. The person who called simply puffed out a cloud of smoke while slowly reading a page of information. One of our arms suppliers was taken down, it was the Gambino family of West Blue, the person replied calmly, a woman. You didn't call me for such a little thing, the animalistic voice thundered out in impatience. The woman's face was hidden in the cover of the dark, but her soft smile was quite visible. A young man, no older than 15, she said. He alone took down the Gambino family within a few hours. The woman continued, that's not the main point, rather it's his name. She then glanced at the details listed on the sheet of paper in front of her. Einar D. Damien. There was a pause in the conversation. Einar D., the voice on the other end seemed interested. Zahahaha. Keep an eye on his movements, tell me when he resurfaces. When, not if, the woman curiously asked. AD can't help themselves from challenging the world government's authority, it's in our blood, zahahaha. I'll do as you ask, Captain. Catcha, the snail went to sleep as the call ended. The woman breathed out a soft sigh as she wiped a bead of sweat off her young face. She was quite young and carried an air of sensuality. Another young monster, I feel as if you will be something special, let's see how far you go. Greta Island, West Blue. So you actually did it, young one, Captain Raiden muttered as he heard the report. But can you remain resolute in the path you have chosen? The 8-foot-tall Marine sighed. He was greatly impressed, but also worried for the young man, now deemed a pirate. Once the frenzy of the El Paver settles down, not just the Marines, but the other Mafia will also hunt Damien down. Such an unpredictable factor is disliked by all. If you can't control him, then kill him. 5 days later. West Blue. A tired-looking ship sailed past the clear ocean of the West Blue. It had the Gambino family symbol on it. Damien put down a book titled A Million Species Explored, by Clover, Captain of the Clover Pirates. Naturally, the author's name was awfully familiar to him. And yet the reading was disrupted by a seagull with a newspaper. It was not the same ones from the future, but rather a bird Damien had personally asked to bring him news from nearby islands. The paper was unfolded fully as Damien saw the title. A storm of violence swamps the West Blue. The main story was about the fall of the infamous Gambino family of the 5 families. The main perpetrator of the incident was also highlighted in bolded font. Alongside a bounty paper. Wanted Einar, D. Damien. 100 million. Dead or alive? No epithet? Should I feel disrespected? Damien muttered with a wry smile. Though he chose to shrug it off with a hint of narcissism, well, whatever, at least the picture captured some of my charm. Sabayati Archipelago, Paradise Sea of the Grand Line. A first bounty of 100 million on a 14-year-old? And from the West Blue at that. 5 kingdoms under the world government lost nearly 10,000 Marines and civilians from the unrest caused by this monster. I say we toss him into impel down forever. Just last year there was another kid around this one's age who was given a bounty of 70 million, he's a monster who ransacked Marine ships for food, and now there's this monster. The people were shocked. Some were fearful, some excited. It was a moment when the New World was already in chaos, and now the more peaceful seas outside of the Grand Line had begun to boil as well. No one knew what was to come, but it would surely lead to more innocents dying unwilling deaths. 6 days later. Renaissance Island, West Blue. A worn-down ship docked onto the uninhabited island. The plants and greenery seemed to dance in welcome as the gentle and nostalgic breeze waved by. Damien stepped on familiar soil, returning home after almost a month of travel. He walked through the welcoming woods while thinking about his next steps. Not time to sail out yet, I need armament haki at the least, he concluded. Luffy ended up clashing with Smoker just weeks after he departed from Goa Island and was saved by Dragon. Damien does not have that identity and no one to help him, there was no way he'd go off into a much more hellish era without having the tools to fight Logia opponents. I also need more stamina and strength, the Rokushiki would certainly help with my lack of mobility. Therefore, Damien had created a to-do list. 1. Comprehend the Rokushiki. 2. Attain armament haki. 3. Further improve his physical capabilities as much as possible. The first 2 were a must to sail out into the Grand Line, the latter was more of a as much as possible situation. Damien felt that around 2 years of wait would be enough and naturally resumed his thorough training once again. Boom! A loud explosion echoed through Renaissance Island as a giant sea king attacked the bay. Moonwalk. A black shadow jumped on what seemed to be air as it reached 50 meters in height. The shadow resembled a young man as he shot forward from the sky and toward the sea king. His fist was coiled back, ready to shoot forth. Oddly enough, the fist was soon wrapped with a dull sheet of black armor. The youth's fist went on and slammed onto the sea king's dome. Bam! A quick shockwave erupted as a fist dug into the skull of the beast. Rawr! It roared in pain and fury, its eyes dimmed as blood splashed from its cracked open skull. The young man landed on the ground with a thud, his black fist returning to normal. A few large chunks of flesh were about to rain on the red-eyed youth as he instead aimed out his right index finger. Flying finger pistol barrage. Zip whip zip. An onslaught of air pockets shot out from the tip of the finger as they were nailed into the raining meat, causing it to explode in the sky. This way, not even a speck of dirt landed on the young man's body, allowing him to casually walk away. He had medium-length black hair with red streaks running down the left side while fashioning a thin scar above his right eye. The crimson pupils carried firmness and great ambition. Damien, who had cleaned up a rather large sea king, had been preparing himself to depart from his home island. Having spent 2 more years in hardcore training, he was ready to sail the seas and take another step towards his path to power. The years of training and an incredibly healthy diet had led to a sizable growth for the now 16-year-old. Damien's body was muscular and brimming with power, enough to send just about any lady from his back home into a coma from just a peek. He had grown rather handsome as well, perhaps the genes of a dryad could be considered quite enviable. Image of Damien, in Discord. Sybil, bring up my stats, it's been quite a few chapters since I've seen them, he said. Coming up. Einar D. Damien. Age, 16 years, 2 months, 4 days. Height, 10 feet 1 inch, 3.07 m. Status, thriving. Devil fruit, pulverize fruit, nigh intermediate mastery, upward arrow. Fruit rating, 6.5 stars. Sea stone resistance, 56.6% upward arrow. Skills, rapid recovery, plus, beastly vitality, plus, evol able anatomy, natural conscience, plus, will of D, Roku Shiki. Haki, observation haki, intermediate mastery, upward arrow, armament haki, initial mastery, upward arrow. Strength, bottom tier Yonko commander upward arrow, Brook, Tesoro level. Equals dash equals dash, dash 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 equals dash equals. Yet again the feeling of pent-up power had arrived after the 2-year training session. Both the physical and spiritual growth had led to feelings of a flood of power building up. Damien jumped straight into concentrating his body into a meditative posture as he felt the growth in bodily capabilities. His bones and tendons hardened as the flesh strengthened and solidified further, the blood vessels dilated as the muscles devoured energy for their evolution. Rapid recovery has evolved into lightning recovery. Beastly vitality has evolved into mighty vitality. A wave of heat passed through the young man's body as his eyes sharpened with his newfound power. Lightning recovery, 3 times the speed of rapid recovery. Mighty vitality, 3 times the durability of beastly vitality. He had grown in strength once more. Hee, Damien gave a wry smile. Even with this recovery and vitality, I still pale in comparison to the real monsters out there. Kaido's acclaimed invulnerability, Big Mom's steel balloon and Whitebeard's absurd vitality, he listed to himself, people vastly beyond himself. Though it could be considered a step in the right direction. This feeling, Damien muttered as he felt his senses feel rather constrained. It was something that he had felt throughout the past few months as his observation haki had continued to grow. Not long ago he raised his observation to intermediate mastery. Essentially it allowed him to further his range of haki and allow him to sense finer and sharper movements. The main point was that the feeling of observation was similar to his natural conscience which gave him the ability to converse with nature. The same feeling of evolution was present. His mind felt overwhelmed with newfound senses as the world slowed down around him. The voices, the sounds, and the whispers of life were all magnified to the nth degree. Ugh, Damien groaned in discomfort, grabbing his head. And then came a ding in his mind. Natural conscience has evolved into voice of all living things. Damien subconsciously took in a deep breath as the voices of trees, grass, and greenery were mixed with the voices of the animals, birds, and even insects. This is like the voice of all things used by Roger, Luffy, Odin and Momonosuke, he murmured. But mine only hears living things. Perhaps as my observation grows in mastery, I can take this skill to the level of Roger, Damien surmised. However, the feeling of progress was quickly dispelled as Damien clenched his hand. FWWM. The same sound of armor being plated went off as a dull black sheet of metal was wrapped around his hand. My armament haki is barely worth talking about, staying here any longer will be a waste of time. The same was true with his devil fruit. The thing was that training his body could only increase his stamina which would then increase his fruit ability usage as well. But it wouldn't increase his mastery of the devil fruit to the next level. A few hours later, Damien had familiarized himself with his new abilities and made his way to the heart of the island. The one area he visited almost every week to remind himself of his past weakness. Damien heard the welcome from the nearby nature as he sat down in the soothing land. The well he once hid in had broken down though was filled with water after years of no usage. He gazed at the grove of trees that formed the portrait of his mother. Still the same over the past 9 years. The scene was a mix of nostalgia and old pain. After a few silent moments, Damien stood up from his seat and touched the warm bark of the tree. You told me to live, he murmured. I will put everything I have on the line to stand where no one can push me down. Under the solemn face of the young man were the 2 crimson pupils that seemed to glow in response. It was a flash of pure ambition. What Damien didn't know was that deep down in his mind was a whirlwind of wild currents that churned all over, like a hurricane building up, waiting to free itself from its confines and break the chains that shackled it. I'll be back, one day. A while later. Goodbye, Renaissance Island, the red-eyed youth muttered as he unfurled the sails of the broken-down ship that was once under the control of the Gambino family. Damien held up a crinkly map in front of him, adjusting the ship to head east at full speed. The weather was quite nice and a smooth journey was expected. The West Blue was known for its 5 mafia families and 2 major sites that Damien was familiar with. O'Hara, where the Tree of Knowledge was rooted, and Kano Country where Don Shinjao hailed from. However, Damien had no real reason to go to either site as of now, rather his goal was somewhere else. Severa Island, the island right before the reverse mountain, kinda like the log town of West Blue, Damien thought out loud as he read the name of the island. 11 days later. Severa Island, West Blue. A 16-year-old young teen walked through the crowd of hundreds under the joyous atmosphere. Bright and clear skies, flocked with the island's inhabitants. All one could hear was their endless chatter. Most people here think the area to be a relatively safe and healthy society, but those with sharp enough eyes would feel the wisps of danger hidden about. As this was the island right before the Grand Line, the pirates' population here was noticeable. But there was an unofficial rule to abide by: don't make too much noise and the Marines will not bother you. Damien made his way to a small bar by the edge of the road. A few rats scurried through the side as some droplets of water dripped onto the stone road. Creak. The wooden doors parted as the young man walked into the crowded pub. Some drunk men sat near the front of the bar, talking amongst themselves. "Give me some sake," Damien said casually as he sat on an empty stool. The waiter blinked as he examined his customer. Perhaps you are a little young dash." His words were interrupted with a subconscious gulp as crimson pupils locked onto him. Right away." The order came fast as Damien drank down the island's special drink. He wasn't an alcoholic like many pirates, rather he tasted the sake from the Gambino family a few years ago and found the taste intriguing. Slurp. He sipped down the throat-burning liquid while in thought. There were a few paths Damien could go down. He could put up his own pirate flag and traverse the seas with a crew he would need to put together. But there was a major problem. The Rocks pirates were the big dogs of the current era, and who knows what other monsters were present. Riding into the sea now would be disastrous. It's currently the year of May 1st of 1482, Damien thought to himself. The God Valley incident that led to the annihilation of the Rocks pirates happened in 1486. Damien was lost in thought as he leaned his head back. A large shadow was cast over him suddenly. "And here I thought I came for a drink but ended up finding a big wad of walking berries," a grumbly voice broke out. A few tens of men soon came surrounding the young man on the stool, vicious grins plastered over their faces. "Though you've grown older, you should be the kid on this poster, right?" The 11-foot-tall, 3.35 m, man questioned as he waved an old bounty. Damien glanced at the poster and simply nodded. "If you want an autograph then you gotta wait for me to finish my drink." The pirates blinked and then broke into a boisterous laugh. "Ya ba 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 ba. I want your head, kill him." The pirate unsheathed his scimitar and slashed down with great power. The blade cut the air and descended on Damien's neck, but the result was not what the onlookers expected. Crack! The blade shook upon impact as the force ripped it off from its handle and was shot and driven into the ceiling with a bang. A deafening silence ensued. Thunk! Damien lowered his empty cup and slowly stood up, much to the fear of those surrounding him. He was a monster 2 years ago, perhaps it's a bad idea to mess with him now. A younger pirate muttered. Damien simply cracked his neck, raised his leg and swung it around. Tempest kick, orbital slash. A near 360-degree slash of the air followed Damien's swinging foot as the collection of air raged onwards. The pirates were too slow to move as their bodies were quite literally split in half. The slash continued as the tens of pirates were halved, sending out geysers of blood to paint the worn-down floorboards. Krrrr boom! The entire bar was split in two. Crash! The building fell upon itself as a cloud of dust rose as a result. Damien looked satisfied and suddenly thought of a funny thought. Click! A pen materialized in his hand as he picked up his bounty poster. Scratch scratch! Take this, he handed the signed paper to the quivering barkeeper. In a few years, it'll sell for a lot. The man was too frightened to speak, but he did as told, pocketing the poster. Damien stepped out from the dust cloud as the people around him simply gulped in fear. And yet something odd happened at the distance. Boom! A huge explosion shook the island as a mushroom cloud dominated the sky, sending the birds and wildlife into a panic. The people were no better, creating a stampede to escape. Damien squinted his eyes to the far end of the island. It was the pirate area. He made his way over, pushing past the hordes of citizens wanting the escape. Damien soon saw the docks that were broken and ripped apart. Dead bodies floated over the muddy sea as a large group of marines circled the ship nearby. A stench of blood mixed with the salty sea air assaulted the young pirate's nose, alongside the wailing cries of anguish and pain. It wasn't entirely clear due to the dust and fire, but Damien could make out a hulking frame on a rampage, massacring a crowd of marines. Blood splashed wildly as the marines were whittled away. Damien was watching from 100 or so meters away, but then a voice made its way to his ears. Yufufufo, I found quite an interesting person on this small island. I couldn't sense her, Damien thought in alarm, whizzing to the side to see the woman who had snuck up on him. She was only a mere 6 feet 1 inch in height but had quite the figure. The woman had short black hair, with 2 tufts pointing upwards and, casually smoking a cigarette. She wore a pink tank top with a spider motif, exposing her large cleavage for all to see. A thin smile etched on her face as she watched the young pirate in front of her with curiosity. Damien then glanced at the battle that embroiled the marines not far away. The dust had cleared, alongside the marines that were left in broken bones and ruined bodies. He saw the hulking figure responsible for the carnage. Thick, muscular arms, a simple shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a black vest over it. Long dark hair added with the two large horns protruding from both sides of his skull, a heavy mace in one hand, dripping with flesh and blood, a terrifying image. Though under the viscous appearance was a young face, not much older than that of Damien. "These Marines of the West Blue are too weak," the monstrous young man roared out with a grin. The woman then replied with a casual tone, "Don't expect so much from the outer seas." The large young man simply grumbled and went into the ship to fetch something. "Einar D. Damien," she said with a small smile. "I've been meaning to find you. My name is Shakiaka but my friends call me Shuki, care for a chat?" Chapter 12, The Status Quo. Shuki, the future wife of the Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh, Damien thought with surprise. Her image, in discord. The woman watched in intrigue, blowing a cloud of smoke. Finally, Damien spoke up, "What do you want to talk about?" Shuki beamed a thin smile and said, "You should know whose flag we're under." Damien slowly nodded and gave his thoughts, "Rock's Pirates." Shuki nodded at Damien's answer and slowly walked to a deserted seating area at the local cafe. The younger pirate followed suit, seating himself in front of the lax woman. A short silence arrived between the two as the background booms were apparent. Shuki's companion continued wreaking havoc in the distance. The young woman, in between some puffs of smoke, asked, "Do you know the major forces of the Grand Line so far?" Damien shook his head. The information regarding the Grand Line, let alone the New World, was heavily controlled. The world government did not want the public to know the lack of control they had in those waters and chose to keep the status quo unknown. Shuki hummed, not surprised by the answer. "In terms of pirates, there is one overwhelming force that has existed for quite some time," she said. "They are called the Three Overlords of the Sea." Damien squinted his eyes at the newfound knowledge but chose against interrupting. Shuki nodded with a hint of approval, before continuing, "These three have held the reins to the New World for decades. A primitive version of the Yonko, then," Damien concluded in his mind. "Thaddeus Enigma. Eso Borealis. Pride Dissolution." She then tapped her cigarette with her finger and proceeded to take another puff. "The world government has 6 main powerhouses to combat these overlords." She then listed them out once more. Fleet Admiral, Strange Beast Kong. The 3 admirals, Buddha Sengoku, Basara the Mountain, and Kurawashi Masao. Alongside the 2 new rising stars, Garp the Fist and Black Arm Zephyr. She then showed a slightly annoyed expression, almost that of pouting. "That man-ape Garp even chased me down not too long ago, what a pain he can be." Huu. Damien took a deep breath as he stored the data in his mind. He was unaware of all 3 overlords and 2 of the admirals. In other words, they were extraneous to the story and ended up lost in the annals of history. Damien then picked up a vital missing piece of information, "So the Rock's pirates want to challenge the status quo." Shuki smiled in agreement, giving an alluring smile, our captain would never allow such pirates to exist. After all, his end goal goes far beyond such petty notions of balance." Though another moment and the woman's demeanor flatlined as she muttered, "The Rock's pirates, to say the least, are simply a collection of pure evil." Damien saw a pang of ambivalence flash in the woman's eyes, a certain helplessness. He then addressed the elephant in the room, "And you've come all the way here, why?" Shuki gazed at the young man's eyes, and spoke after a second. "Our captain wants to change the world, but before that, he needs a mighty ship." She continued, "A ship that can carry the weight of the world. And its ingredients are rather rare." Shuki then glanced at an alley to the far right, a few seconds before a black-clothed man slowly walked out. Damien watched as the man soon stepped in front of their table. "Shakiaku," he nodded as a grey portal-like construct opened by the wave of his hand. Thwonk. Large stacks of wood slammed onto the ground, piling up to a huge amount. "Our deal has concluded," the mysterious man said, disappearing into a similar portal of his own. Meanwhile, Damien eyed the wood and immediately felt its great durability. "Wood from the treasure tree Atom." Shuki nodded, "One of 2 main things we need." She then fixed her focus on Damien and smiled. "I see great ambition in your eyes, Damien-chan." The young pirate in question couldn't help but twitch as he heard her way of addressing him. "You should know the state of the seas is not something you can easily subvert, especially at your age." She then waved her hand, "You are alone and have no one to rely on, no navigator to guide your path and no ship to carry you." Damien squinted his eyes in return, "Where are you going with this?" She shrugged, "It's very simple, the captain took in a new apprentice on the ship a couple of years ago, I can give you that same invitation." Shuki eyed Damien's paws and flashed a smile, "You bear the surname D like the captain, plus, he favors the young and feisty." Boom. Their conversation was then interrupted, however. A large shadow dropped, throwing shards of earth out of the ground and spiking out. A dull echo boomed through the emptied area, shattering glass in its wake. Worororo, a laugh thundered out, originating from a hulking figure at the core of the crater. The deep voice came alongside a curious tone, "You're the one who they suspect to become a top-tier supernova, I wasn't expecting to run into you here." Damien glanced at the grinning figure of the beast-like human, it was the future Emperor of the Seas, Kaido. Though he didn't have his azure dragon fruit as of now, he was still an imposing figure, standing at a towering height of 19 feet, 5.79 meters. Image of Kaido, in Discord. The beast-like pirate was grinning and glaring at Damien, deep lust for battle evident in his eyes. The chair screeched as Damien stood up, matching the bone-chilling glare with one of his own, returning it to the pirate more than twice his own height. A short standstill erupted as the two young men of similar ages simply eyed one another. Almost like a duel of fates. Shuki gave out a small sigh and picked up her pistol. Bang, bang, bang. 3 bullets were fired, though not someone, but rather around the piles of wood. The bullets formed a triangle that soon was connected with black lines, and soon everything inside the triangular net went purple and sucked in all the wood. The purple void-like ground soon disappeared as the wood was nowhere to be seen. A devil fruit. Shuki, as if she expected the question, tapped her gun and said with a wink, "My pistol is a little special." She then walked away from the two. "I'll watch from the side as you boys play around," Shuki said as she sat by the edge of the pier. Though she seemed quite curious about the coming duel. Rumble. The ground shuddered as the 19-foot-tall monster grabbed his mace that was wedged into the ground and placed it on his shoulder. Damien smirked in return, breathing in the tense atmosphere. "Bring it on," he waved. Kaido broke out in a grin and raged forward without care. Loud gong-like steps went off following the hulking mass of the pirate. The mace was raised into the sky, intending to crash into its opponent. Boom! The air whistled as the heavy weapon slammed into Damien's position. "He wants to take it head-on," Shuki thought as she saw the response. Damien raised his left fist clad it in haki and returned a punch. Clang! The sound of metal on metal erupted as the ground between them was torn asunder, a wave of shock followed and left all nearby windows in pieces. A grinding noise soon followed as the two attacks struggled to give way to one another. Damien smirked as he felt his haki waver, but enough to stop the descending mace. Whiz! Damien's body disappeared and reappeared at eye level with Kaido and shot 4 fingers into his opponent's chest. The fingers that were wrapped in air and haki dug into the beast-like pirate's skin and left a bloody graze. Kaido took a step back and saw his bruised chest. The Navy's little tricks, they tickle. He once again raised his club, but this time he jumped into the air with a loud bang, reaching nearly 20 meters in the sky. Growling. The air groaned as Kaido shifted his weight, holding his weapon up with both hands. FWWM. Damien readied both arms as they were wrapped in a dull coat of haki, armoring his defense. Bam! A resounding explosion went off as Damien gritted his teeth, holding up the coming mace. His fingers creaked at the metallic texture, trying to drill themselves in. A huge weight fell onto the red-eyed pirate as he held up the weight of both Kaido's attack and weight, both pushing forth, wrestling for victory. Rumble. The ground under Damien was cracked like a mirror as the shockwave continued to erupt. Kaido gave up the assault and landed a handful of meters away. He gave no chance for recovery and swung his club forth once more, a roar of refusal following it. Damien once again returned a powerful left fist as he clashed head-on with the absurdly large mace. What power, he thought with some struggle as his feet tore into the ground to maintain his balance. But my armament haki is growing fast. Damien then released his attack in retreat, causing Kaido to stagger a few steps forward due to inertia. Whiz! Utilizing Soru allowed Damien to once again appear in the air in front of the momentarily immobilized pirate, a fist ready. Bam! Damien slammed his fist into the very sternum of the future emperor, driving all his physical power in without mercy. Ugh! Kaido gave out a groan as he felt his ribs tremble. He was then shot forth at great speeds from the hit and crashed into the buildings a few hundred meters away. Kaido went through 3 walls as the debris rained down everywhere. Damien narrowed his eyes at the crash and saw a predictable result. Kaido stood up in no time, throwing off huge piles of concrete and earth with ease, eliciting a deep rumble. His chest was purple with some bruising but nothing worth mentioning. Worora! Again, he roared out with a wide grin. He picked up his fallen mace and rushed forward with a thunderous charge. Crackle! Purple lightning flashed around the weapon as if it was awakened from slumber, the smell of a beast emanated from the young pirate. His haki is combusting the air into lightning. Damien thought as he saw the flashing spectacle. Reime Haka! Kaido drove his thunderous mace without mercy as the air was ripped apart, the sheer pressure sent out tornadoes of wind as the giant weapon neared Damien. Damien smiled in response as he ran headfirst into the attack. Purr up! His black fist was soon covered with a bubbling crimson mist. Another stream of energy was helically wrapped around his arm while the main one gathered at his fist. Phew! Suddenly the energy around his arm shot forth like a spring, driving the one gathered in his hand like a rocket. Flames sparked from the increased friction from the crushing ability as it blazed its way to the coming mace. Fury Road! Boom! The erupting fist clashed with the black mace dancing with electricity as a booming shockwave pulsed out. The air screeched in return as the overpowering strength of Kaido collided with Damien's crushing powers. The ground shattered apart in a spectacle of red and purple as the two sides refused to back down. The two young pirates roared out in unison, loud enough to overshadow the torrents of air whirling out from their collision. Boom! Another explosion rattled the island as the two were soon sent flying in opposite directions and crashing into the walls at the expense of Severa Island. Dust rained down and debris befell the land, more resembling a battlefield than a peaceful island. Cough cough. Damien slowly stood up from the pile of debris as some blood dribbled from his mouth. He glanced at his broken arm which had turned purple. Kaido, on the other side, got up as well, his right arm was bruised and his wrist seemed to have cracked from the clash. However, both young pirates had something in common, a grin plastered to their faces. Damien's broken arm creaked as it was soon put back together and the recovery began. Kaido's physical condition was surely better but his beloved club was cracked. The two were about to rush at each other once more but... Ahem, a voice broke out. That's enough for now, the marines from nearby branches will be here soon and I can't gamble the wood on your little game, Shuki said as she walked in between the two. Kaido grumbled, to hell with those marines. Shuki was not amused. You can play later, right now we have a mission to complete and you'll have to hunt and cook your own food, Kaido-chan. The horned youth scoffed in return as he lowered his fighting desire in silent surrender. Shuki then turned towards Damien and said, your strength went beyond my expectations. She then winked in question, well, what do you say, do you want to come under the Rocks Pirates as an apprentice? Well, what do you say, do you want to come under the Rocks Pirates as an apprentice? Damien narrowed his eyes at the smoking woman. Shakiyaku and Kaido. Both had deep connections to the huddle of power in the New World, though currently, they both were simply weapons of Rocks DZBek. Such an invitation could be considered signing one's own death certificate, but to Damien, it was a calling. Rocks is due to fall in a few years, the young pirate thought to himself. The flourish way to survive in this hellish era would be in the den of danger. Damien could feel that his small clash with Kaido had already shaped his haki quite a bit, reflected in the notification that had come. Armament haki mastery has reached the intermediate stage. Such a boost in strength begged the question, just what height could he reach by being around such monsters? A smile appeared on the young pirate's face as he resolutely answered, all right, I'll join. Hehe, I look forward to your growth, Damien-chan. Shuki returned a smile. She then walked to the docks, caring little of the mess they left behind. Let's go then, we need to leave before some nuisances arrive. Kaido roared out a laugh, Worororo. We'll finish our fight later. Pull up Kaido's stats, Damien ordered. After a duel, it was enough to quantify the future emperor's current power. Kaido. Age, 17 years old. Height, 19, 5.79 m. Status, healthy. Devil fruit, none. Haki, observation haki, intermediate mastery, armament haki, intermediate mastery, conqueror's haki, initial mastery. Strength, middle tier Yonko commander. He was around Damien's strength level. But he had a feeling that in a drawn-out combat, it would come down to his devil fruit to decide the outcome. Just their little scuffle now had left some much-desired outcomes to occur. Marine Ford. Fleet Admiral's office. What did you say? A heavy voice boomed within the walls of the office. A large man with thick muscles and scars sat in the seat of power, endless strength brimming from stature. He had a short-sleeve shirt and a grey-colored marine coat draped over his shoulders. The marine had hair and beard arranged in an array of spikes, and some fuzz on both sides of his face. He also sported a stitched scar under his left eye. Image of Kong, in Discord. Fleet Admiral Kong. The news was confirmed and the sightings of Shakiyaku and Kaido of Rocks Pirates alongside Einar D. Damien at Severa Island, the Rear Admiral broke the news. The muscular marine simply squinted his tired eyes as he massaged his forehead. He closed his eyes as a brief figure of a bloodied, grinning man flashed in his mind. Those damn Ds, just one problem after another, looks like Rocks found another new apprentice who will cause me more headaches, Kong muttered. The Fleet Admiral shook his head and ordered, update their bounties, even for that woman supervising them, I want them taken down before they can enter the New World. Kong clenched his fists, we still have time to crush these budding threats. West Blue, near Reverse Mountain. So that's it, the gargantuan continent, the Red Line. Damien exclaimed as he saw the colossal crimson wall run across the entire ocean. No matter how far out you looked, the Red Line just kept on stretching beyond it, cutting beyond the line of clouds, seemingly touching heaven. Image, in Discord. Damien-chan, I'll need you and Kaido-chan to hold up the ship, it will be a rickety ride, Shuki said while preparing the ship to climb the mountain. The two pirates grabbed the sides of the ship as it slowly began to rise up the mountain, creaking uncontrollably. Great amounts of water splashed onto the ship and the two, threatening to push them back down. Creak swish. Moments passed as the ship was fixed in speed as the ascent continued, leaving the west blue behind. Damien eyed the blue sea as they soon disappeared into the clouds. It took a few minutes for the ship to climb to the top of the reverse mountain. A short sigh escaped Damien's mouth as he glanced at the sea of clouds. "Find us!" A whisper suddenly echoed in Damien's ears, drawing his eyes into the white sea. The words had come as soon as the ship reached the apex of the mountain, an area where the ascent from all four seas met. What was that? Damien thought while examining his surroundings. It came from beyond the red line. Paradise Sea, the first part of the New World, lay in the direction the ship was headed while the end of the New World was behind them. A/N, the world is round, so naturally the start of the Grand Line and the end of the Grand Line meet at Reverse Mountain. Damien was left pondering as the ship began to descend the mountain at great speeds, howling winds following suit. Whoosh! He felt the cold and powerful streams of air as the roller coaster ride came to an end. Splash! The broken-down ship finally landed into the Grand Line. Damien walked across the main deck of the rickety ship as he took in the changed atmosphere. The air felt chaotic, much wilder and more out of control than the West Blue. "How do you like the air of the Grand Line, Damien-chan?" a soft voice brought him back. Damien returned a thin smile as he breathed in the air of paradise. Kaido also walked over, impatience etched on his face. "Oi, woman, how long till we go back to Hakinosu?" Shuki shook her head at the young beast. "This is your first main mission, Kaido-chan. We can't return without the new ship, so be ready for a lengthy wait." The man-beast simply growled and then sat his giant body down, falling into a nap immediately. Shuki ignored the snoring Kaido and began speaking to Damien. "We'll go to the nearby island for resupply. I also need to contact the captain about you," she said as she took out an eternal pose from her pocket. The pose had Uruguana written on it, indicating the island it led to. Damien nodded at her words. The journey there would take at least a day and it left some time to waste. Damien proceeded to ask her a question. "Shuki-san, why'd you come under rocks?" The woman glanced at the young man and gave a small sigh. "I'll tell you if you call me Shukine from now on," she said with a teasing smile. Damien scratched his head at the odd request and shrugged in agreement. Puff! She then exhaled a cloud of smoke. "I come from the calm belt, you know where I mean, right?" Damien nodded as he gestured to the snake symbol on her belt, Empress of Amazon Lily, the captain of the Kuja pirates. Shuki gave a small nod and continued, "Right. Well, you see our island is protected by the lack of wind in the calm belt, it keeps the pirates away." She then hummed a little tune while taking in another puff of her cigar. "But there are fruits out there that can give ways to overcome the calm belt," Shuki explained. "As the Empress, I couldn't just wait for the day to come when we no longer could protect ourselves." She continued, "One day I had to come to Sabayati to resupply but got caught up with that garb. It was Rocks who saved me. But that man would never do anything without expecting something in return." A sigh escaped her lips. "A dear love-struck friend of mine wanted to take my place but I ended up turning her down. Since then, we made a deal while I worked under him, acting as his eyes and ears." She then glanced at the young man before him, a hint of helplessness in her eyes. "The captain's name keeps both the navy and other pirates away, but there's always a price for selling your soul to the devil." Damien took in the information and couldn't help but visualize the devil she spoke of. She then walked up, reached up and patted Damien's shoulder. "When we get to the New World, trust no one." Shuki left to go inside the main cabin, leaving a snoring Kaido and a pondering Damien behind. A day later. Uruguana Island, Paradise. Munch. Burp. Two young men sat at a giant table as an absurd amount of food was slowly inhaled away. Though the youth differed greatly in height, they both had a mind-numbing appetite. It was like a bottomless pit, the food kept on disappearing as the two munched on. Hey, those two have a big reward on their heads," a man whispered from the side as he watched the display. Another man quickly nodded as he read over some papers. They were newly released bounties that had made their way to the world. Wanted Einar, D. Damien. Sin Incarnate. 150 million. Dead or alive. Wanted Kaido. 100 Beast. 220 million. Dead or alive. Damien was slightly annoyed by the vast difference in the numbers. The only reason the gap existed was due to Damien's disappearance from the world news while Kaido had been rampaging his way through the seas over the past 2 years. "What the hell is up with that epithet? What sin did I commit?" he said with a confused look. Kaido, who was gobbling a huge piece of meat, grinned, "Worororo. Our captain is called the Abyssal Sin, looks like the Navy sees you as his little toy." The revelation left Damien befuddled. Though seeing Kaido's condescending look made him shoot back, "I guess they see me as a graver threat than you, just wait till I leave you in the dust." Crunch! A huge chunk of the table was ripped off by the hulking pirate as he heard Damien's reply. The people nearby chose against picking a fight as they just watched the two young monsters arguing amongst one another, while simultaneously devouring enough food to fuel a small village. Burp. Kaido let out a ground-shaking burp as he gurgled down a huge barrel of alcohol. Damien just shook his head at the scolding to come, and it came fast. A slender woman appeared from the side with a stern face. You shouldn't be drinking at your age, Kaido-chan, it'll mess with your growth. Even though her size was dwarfed by the hulking young pirate, she carried a certain air of hidden power. Kaido harumphed at the scolding, something that tastes good can't be bad for you, stop pestering me, woman. Shuki squinted her eyes in return, don't test my patience, young man. The giant teenager just growled as he threw the sake to the side, exploding into an aromatic spectacle. Damien couldn't help but laugh out loud as he saw the future emperor being reprimanded like a child. Even the spectators were baffled but chose not to display their amusement and stifled their laugh from the fear of the 6-foot-tall woman. A man gulped as he waved another bounty poster around, ensuring no one nearby was dumb enough to make problems. Dash wanted dash. Shakiyaku. Black Death. 670 million. Dead or alive. A few hours later. Shuki had finished some shopping and resupplying, alongside repairing the ship enough to sail for another few months. Kaido was napping away as Damien made his way to the small room inside the cabin. It was the same room Shuki was in. The female pirate had called him for something of grave importance. He took a deep breath, knowing what was waiting for him once he entered. Creak. The wooden door opened as the red-eyed youth walked in. He saw the small room that was lightly lit, a normal bed and furniture in place. Damien glanced at the short-haired woman sitting by the table, a transponder snail set in front of her. The snail emulated the face of the person on the other side of the call. Wild hair set in spiky dreads, feral expression plastered to the scarred face, a wide grin etched on. Shuki nodded at Damien in silence and turned her attention back to the snail. He's here now, Captain. She then gestured for Damien to take the snail's receiver and moved out of the way. Damien saw the snail break out in a wider grin as it broke out a deep and hoarse voice. Einardi, it said. A familiar name. Damien took a deep breath and replied in an unshaken voice, Rox D. Zebek. The snail's scarred and savage appearance warped into deep intrigue. Zahahaha, he laughed in a low tone. You're the interesting kid that left West Blue in shambles a few years ago. The voice continued, Shakiyaku told me that you want to come under my flag as an apprentice. Good, very good, I always welcome you ambitious brats. His voice then grew frighteningly low, just remember this, kid, you can betray me whenever you want but just be prepared for the hell that will follow. A solemn expression appeared on the young pirate's face as he heard the menacing voice. Damien wasn't surprised at the man's words, if anything, he admired Zebek's power to make so many powerful forces subservient to him. He vied for that power too. The snail then addressed the woman standing by the side. Shakiyaku, you've brought some heat on yourself by picking up that kid, you head to Sabayati while the new kid will go to Yozora Island to get the ore. Rox went on to say, I'll send someone to bring you to the new world from there in a month. The snail didn't wait for a reply and simply hung up with a, catcha. Shuki put away the snail and then glanced at Damien, you heard the boss. I'll give you the eternal pose to Yozora Island in a ship, your mission is to retrieve the eternal ore that is kept there. She then warned Damien, that place is also called the Island of Darkness. According to the captain he read a poneglyph that said the people at Yozora Island await for someone to come and retrieve that very ore. Damien noted down the fact that Zebek was able to decipher poneglyphs somehow and then proceeded to ask, what exactly is the ore for? The woman shrugged, Captain said it can absorb and spread out forces it's subjected to in some magical way, let's just say that Adam's Oak is not enough for a ship to carry the monsters under the Rock's flag. The two then walk out to the main deck of the ship. Take these and buy a small ship, you have a month to rendezvous with us at Sabayati, I'll wait for you there. Damien grabbed the items the woman gave him, some money to buy a ship, an eternal pose to Yozora Island, a Vivre card with Shuki's name on it, and some food. She then pulled out a small red pouch and raised her pistol. Bang, bang. The bullets hit the outside of the pouch and seemed to enchant it with some purple void-like energy. This pouch will store the ore, better than you carrying it back overseas, no. Damien nodded, though he could make do without the pouch with his inventory, he naturally didn't want to expose it. He graciously took all the items and walked to the edge of the ship. See you in a month then, Shuki-ne. He hopped off using moonwalk and made his way to the shipyard of Uruguana. Shuki gave out a small laugh, what an odd kid. A few days later. Calling it the Island of Darkness wasn't an understatement, Damien muttered. He was currently on a small ship, not far from the gloomy landmass before him. Yozora Island was covered with a thick, black cloud that was simply immobile. It didn't move, float or even shift in position like a blanket covering the land under it. No light passed through, just a perpetual darkness. Island image, in Discord. Creak. The ship docked on and the anchor splashed into the sea. According to historical archives, this island had no random weather changes, it was just forever dark with occasional rain. Pitter-patter. It was one of those rainy days as the water befell the land. Damien landed on the dark soil, his boots digging into the moist soil. The island was relatively small, covered with coniferous trees, silent chirps echoed through the valley as a swampy smell covered the land. A symphony of voices arrived in his ears, originating from the grass, trees, and other foliage. The life that existed on land was used to darkness, the grass was a special kind that had evolved to live off the sunlight reflected by the moon. Many mushrooms and nightly plants exist, some even evolving to develop their own luminescence. Show me the way. The natural life seemed to hear Damien's thoughts and began to weave and mold a path for him to travel. Some glow bugs and fireflies appeared and lit the way over, granting Damien a full view of the path. A castle, Damien murmured as he saw the structure at the center of the land. It was built over a large cliff, an olden-style manor that dominated its relative landscape, an eerie sight to say the least. Manor image, in discord. Damien felt a distant gaze, but he was unable to pinpoint it, leaving him no choice but to venture on ahead. He walked through the self-clearing grounds, the trees and grass granting him the fastest path to the castle. Eventually, he came through a large open clearing, surrounded by cone-like trees, seemingly unnatural. Watch out! The voice of the trees echoed in Damien's ears as he heard a sharp whistle of the air. Shing! Damien's eyes widened as he felt the touch of a cold blade at the back of his neck. It didn't cut into his skin, just rested on his neck, a warning not to move. I didn't come here for a fight, Damien calmly stated. Though he remained unmoved, Damien's boots were swirling with crimson mist, ready to return an attack if needed. A silent moment passed as he then heard a sharp yet stern voice. Why have you come here? It was a man's voice, middle-aged, confident. I was sent here to pick up an ore, the poneglyph said it to be here. Damien waited and felt a very faint tremor in the sword that was grazing his skin, now sure that the poneglyph meant quite a lot to the man. Another moment passed as the blade was removed from Damien's neck. The young pirate slowly turned his head and saw the man behind him. He was around 7 feet tall. He looked to be in his early 40s. The upper half of his face was covered with a hood, probably to keep away from the rain. He seemed to have short dark hair and a stubble beard. The man wore a dark coat that covered his entire body, but the missing right arm was obvious. A sharp katana-style sword was in the man's left hand, but he was still quite defensive. You've read the stone, the man lightly said. Damien just gave a small nod as he replied, I came for the Eternal Oregon. The man's eyes seemed to examine the young man before him, even though they were hidden under the hood, Damien felt the sharp gaze. Follow me to the castle. The man took off in the direction of the dark mansion, and Damien followed suit. Even with a missing limb, it feels like he can cut me up, quite the guardians. It took a quiet 10-minute walk to reach the castle. It was Gothic-themed with creaky and dark-colored wood. Water dripped down the rotting wood, sending ripples through the puddles littered over the region. The two walked in via the main doors that creaked in response. The halls were lit with green candles, and a warm and cozy ambience filled the rooms. It's more welcoming than I thought, Damien said. The man looked at him and nodded, I hope you forgive me for my haste earlier, there have been many invaders in the past few years. Damien shrugged, showing he didn't mind. The man seemed more comfortable as he elaborated, it happened 20 months ago, a few thousands raided our land looking for treasure. They used my nieces and nephews to kill their parents and then them. It took everything to repel them, an arm from me. Only my wife and son remain with me as their protector. The two walked down the red-carpeted floor and into the main lounge area. Our ancestors have been waiting for someone to collect the ore for centuries now, the man said. As they made their way to the sofa at the edge of the room. The red couch was laid in front of a giant window that spanned from wall to wall, boasting a wide view of the hedge maze beyond it. A beautiful woman sat on the couch, combing a very young child's hair. The black-haired woman carefully sat the child to the side and stood up, bringing her hands together in obvious excitement, a visitor, how rare. Damien blinked at the rather contrast between husband and wife but something else caught his gaze, the woman's eyes. The pupils were yellow, with 2 black rings circling them, sharp, piercing eyes to say the least. Damien took a deep breath as he made the connection but took it slow. My name is Einar D. Damien, pardon the intrusion, he said, somewhat impressed by his own etiquette. The woman beamed a smile and replied courtly, what a well-mannered young man, my name is Mina, and you've met my husband, Vlad. The man by the side gave a quick ahem and took off his hood, the same eyes and hair color apparent. Why don't you have a seat while I get some tea, dear, why don't you change into something warm, Mina said, getting up from her seat. This left Damien on the sofa with their child. They just leave a stranger with their kid, the pirate muttered to himself. An awkward silence broke out as Damien's eyebrow twitched under the sharp gaze of the toddler sitting away from him. Damien met his sharp, examining eyes. The child was less than a meter in height, around 38 inches. Same short black hair and piercing yellow eyes. Well, what's your name? Damien asked, though he could guess the reply. The boy tilted his head and blinked a few times. My hawk, he said. Dracula my hawk. The confirmation made Damien take a deep breath, nodding to himself. It also made the pirate take a closer look at the boy, seeing loneliness, curiosity, nervousness, and even excitement in those hawk-like eyes. You're awfully mature for your age, my hawk. Tell me, what do you want to be when you grow up? The boy wasted no time and answered subconsciously, the greatest swordsman in the sea. My hawk then turned his gaze to the hedge maze right outside. A sharp bright light reflected from the center of the maze as if a metallic object was there, and there indeed was. It was a large, silver sword planted within a thick black rock. It had a very odd-shaped golden crossguard with a complex pattern printed upon it, yet the blade carried an unparalleled beauty. My hawk's longing eyes stared at the blade that seemed to cut the low winds every so often. At that moment, Mina came back into the room and gave Damien a cup of tea. My hawk has never seen outsiders since his birth. He may be a little awkward around you, Mina apologized, playing with her son's hair. Damien shook his head while gesturing at the sword outside. Such a sharp weapon left outside in a rock, I take it has great meaning to your family. Mina nodded while also admiring the beauty of the treasured weapon. The blade is one of the 12 supreme blades, Yoru, it has been in that stone for centuries now, she calmly said. You don't feel averse to telling a stranger of such a treasure? Damien asked with some suspicion. Mina just beamed her usual smile. We believe the sword awaits a suitable user, if you can free it from its confines then it's yours to keep. And yet centuries have passed and the blade still waits, Vlad's voice resounded as he stepped back into the room. Damien then glanced at the young boy who was but a toddler. He crouched down at the child's eye level and asked. You've set your sights on that sword, haven't you, kid? My hawk gave a quick nod as he clenched his tiny hands. I'll free the sword one day. The exclamation caught the two parents off guard, but Damien just smirked in return. I look forward to that day then. Mina chimed with an invitation. Damien-kun, why don't you join us for dinner? My husband will need a while to bring out all the treasured ore from the keep. An hour later. Damien had finished a meal with the small yet tight-knit family. It was a hearty meal of a sea king caught by Vlad. Damien even asked some more questions about the family's origin. Supposedly they were tasked to guard the ore by someone centuries ago. The island was dark for as long as time went back. Their ancestors eventually got used to the darkness and gloomy nature of the land. Their eyes evolved under these conditions and over many generations to see much further and finer than others. Swordsmanship was their creed and remains so. Yoru awaited its user while the eternal ore awaited its retriever. According to Vlad, both Yoru and the eternal ore could be said to be equal in their worth. The family even welcomed Damien to stay for a while. Vlad-san, Damien addressed the man sitting before him. They were in a lounge area with deep red sofas. A chandelier holding up 6 green candles hung above them. This is abrupt, but I hope to stay here for a few weeks to train before taking the eternal ore, and for you to help me in my training, the pirate straightforwardly asked. You were able to stay out of my perception before, I want to sharpen those instincts before diving into the new world. He had noticed it before against Shuki. And then with Vlad. Both of them were able to mask their presence from Damien and approach from his blind spots. The older gentleman narrowed his eyes at the bold pirate, seemingly to inspect his worth. Vlad nodded but said with a hint of hesitation, we haven't had friendly guests over here in a long time. I don't mind you staying to train, but you must know that training your senses is best done in deathly scenarios. 3 weeks is not enough time unless... Yet the man's tone sharpened as he said, unless I put you through hell to sharpen those instincts. Such words brought a smile to Damien's face. I wouldn't have it any other way. The two walked outside to an open garden behind the mansion. Mina appeared, holding my hawk's hand as they watched from afar. Vlad and Damien stood 20 meters in between. Shing! Vlad unsheathed his blade as it sliced the air. This is Yozora of the 21 Great Swords, he introduced the dark blade. It has accompanied me for years, let me use it to test your mettle. FWWM, the sword was soon wrapped in thick haki as it glistened a jet black color. The one-armed swordsman shot from his position and appeared only inches from Damien's throat. Clang! A loud clanking sound boomed the area as Damien's metallic fist collided with the blade. A shockwave grumbled the land as Vlad weaved through the air. Whiz! His body flashed and flickered through the air and reappeared meters away from Damien, raining down countless shots. Damien's senses went into overdrive mode as he struggled against the onslaught, slowly and barely warding each hit. Clang! Boom! Bam! Explosions popped incessantly as Damien was forced into an entirely defensive posture. A slight irritation building as his eyes followed the flickering target. Is this all your ambition is worth, young man? Vlad's calm voice echoed in Damien's ears. The young pirate could only grit his teeth and force himself to move faster and faster. Swish! Spurt! Cuts and scrapes decorated his body as blood dribbled out from the razor-sharp Yozora. A one-armed swordsman with speed beyond any foe Damien had yet seen. Don't expect me to give in this easily. Damien's firm voice boomed as his eyes grew sharp. A quick burst of energy spanned out in all directions of Damien's body and cracked the ground in return. It was a loud screech as Vlad paused for a moment. Damien exploited the momentary pause as his blackened fist drove into the man's core. Bam! The overpowering strength from Damien's very flesh rattled the blackened blade that got in the way. Vlad's single arm trembled as his body was shot back with great speed. Whiz! The wind whistled as the man readjusted his balance and landed on his feet tens of meters away. Good strength, Vlad muttered, returning his gaze to the coming enemy. Damien shot forward as his haki-clad fists slammed onto the blades, finally going on the offense. Boom! Bang! Bam! The clash went on for dozens of minutes as it began to balance out. Vlad's sharp and calm sword style left Damien not a moment to rest while he did his absolute best to return equal attacks. His attacks grew fiercer and left fewer openings, but it was nowhere enough to win the battle. You have an excellent talent for combat, Vlad said with an admiring tone as he sheathed his weapon. Damien panting lightly and gazed down at his cut-up appearance. The wounds were superficial considering his vitality, but the blood was enough to turn his attire from black to red. Still far from leaving a scratch on you, though, Damien said with a soft sigh. Mina climbed down and saw Damien's bloodied clothes but was casually waved off. I'm fine, they're just a few scratches. My hawk too made his way down and stared at Damien. The dripping blood contrasted heavily with the firm eyes of its host. You asked me about my goal, the child said. What's yours? Damien glanced at the curious young boy and gave a simple answer. There was a time when my fate was at the mercy of others, since then I made it my goal to never let that happen again. No one will ever hurt what I care for the most. My hawk blinked into a lost state but soon flinched in discomfort as Damien poked the kid's forehead with his index finger. You're just a kid, stop thinking so much, you make me feel stupid with such a mature perspective. Let's go back inside, I'll tell you about the world outside. The two returned to the gloomy castle as the 3-week training session officially kicked off. Chapter 15, 15 Red Metal, Black Shadows. 3 weeks later. Clang. Boom. Short yet powerful explosions went off as flickering slashes rained upon the red-eyed youth. He was currently standing in the center of a large clearing under the dark clouds of Yozora Island. Damien had his eyes closed as he instinctively dodged and blocked the onslaught of attacks. He had begun to anticipate attacks from more than just their intent. This included the slight changes in air current or the vibrations of the earth below him, the variations of heat and so on. He allowed his observation to flow from the entirety of his body as the combat instincts had been drilled into each pore. Damien had quickly grown under the deathly scenarios imposed on him by the one-armed swordsman, leaving his haki far sharper than ever before. The main thing was that he had conditioned his body against the attacks and intents of intelligent persons, something he couldn't do back at Renaissance Island. A grueling schedule of pain and suffering, having bled many times only for it to heal away in seconds. A black-clothed man soon appeared in front of Damien, shaking his head with a sigh. I take it back, your combat talent is simply beyond my understanding. Damien let out a small chuckle as he took off his blindfold. If you had both arms then I'm sure I would have been in much more trouble. The one stern man seemingly incapable of joy was now beaming a thin smile. I'm sure you'll grow beyond my level in a matter of years. The man then sheathed his weapon with a click as the two walked back to the castle, all under the veil of the endless night. A near-meter-tall toddler came running from the cliff as he trailed behind the two. Father, when can I start training too? The child's voice, which was usually devoid of much emotion, was showing great desire and even a bit of desperation. Vlad shook his head, maybe in a few more years. The hawk-eyed child clicked his tongue and ran off into the dark forest. Vlad sighed with a defeated smile. That child has spoken more in the past few weeks than since he was born. It feels odd to see him act like his age. They eventually reached the castle gates where Mina was waiting with some cool drinks. Did he run off again? She rhetorically asked with a sigh. Damien smirked from the side. You can't blame a kid for being impatient. Mina glared at the teenager. You are a kid in my eyes too, fighting so much at a young age. Kids are in such a hurry nowadays. The woman then looked at her husband and said, Dear, take Damien-kun to the treasured ore, I'll go get Hawkshan. Vlad and Damien soon made their way into the heart of the castle. It was a worn-down room with the same green candles that never ran out. Cobwebs decorated the corner of the room as the center was awfully clean. There were columns and rows of rather distinct metal, every single one of them was blood red in color, glistening with mystery. Vlad walked up and picked up a chunk of the metal. It does not rust or break up from the passage of time, hence, eternal Oregon. He then squeezed the metal with his only arm. Crack! The piece of metal shattered like glass and clattered onto the ground. Damien blinked in confusion. Vlad smiled a little and then slashed a haki-clad dagger that was hidden in his jacket on a huge chunk of the metal. Clang! The blade creaked as a piece of reflective metal fell to the ground. Yet it wasn't from the ore but from the blade. Vlad showed Damien the shattered weapon and said, "The ore is weak in small amounts, but nigh unbreakable at high quantities." He continued to explain, "It has the ability to perfectly store and slowly and uniformly release the forces imposed upon itself, this way the larger its body the more absurd force it can intake. Even if hit with a mountainous weight on one side, it will equally divide it all over the area of the ore, effectively cancelling the stress," Vlad finished. Damien slowly nodded with appreciation. "Where does such metal even come from?" Vlad threw his blade onto the ground and gazed back at the hill of red metal. It was oxidized by the blood of an ancient creature centuries ago, it gave it this special characteristic, that's all we know. Damien picked up a tiny piece of the ore. "Sybil, any thoughts?" "I thought you forgot about me, Damien, let me check." "Yes, the bath of blood seems to hold as I detect high levels of hemoglobin and iron in the ore. Most likely the blood was that of a fruit user of sorts in which the user could control the forces applied." She continued, "In other words, any force, even that of devil fruits, applied over a small space will be evenly distributed all over a larger body and in all directions in a controlled time. The fruit user would need to have awakened their power to lead to such a change." Huu. Damien took a deep breath to let the information sink in. Another normal day with abnormal revelations. Perks of being in an anime world. "How much exactly can I take from this?" he asked. Vlad shrugged, "Our mission was to protect it till its rightful owner arrived. From what I know, it's all yours." Damien took out his tiny red pouch. "Well, don't mind if I do." He then pointed the enchanted pouch at the hill of metal. Phew! A huge vacuum soon awakened from the bag as the metal was slowly but surely sucked into the palm-sized bag. Vlad blinked, his surprised face was a little comical as his facial features had difficulty showing such emotions. "You have some interesting tools." Damien smiled in return. Naturally, he didn't intend to give all the ore to Shuki for the ship, keeping a decent amount as commission. He then eyed the older gentleman in front of him. "Thank you for your hospitality, Vlad-san, I'll pay back the debt with whatever you need." Damien gave him a transponder snail that had his appearance on it. A mass of black-red hair, a tiny diagonal scar above one eye, and equipped with a stylish attire. "You can contact me through this." Vlad accepted the snail but then casually said, "I enjoyed the company of a fresh face after all these years, I will surely call you if I need your aid." The two nodded at the thought and went outside. Mina now stood in the greenly lit lounge with a slightly annoyed Mihawk by the doors. She glanced at the red-eyed youth with a smile. "Damien-kun, it seems you got what you came for." "Yes, thank you for your hospitality," Damien thanked as he made his intent to leave clear. Mina slightly smiled, "You've helped Hawkshan become so much more energetic, as a mother I can't thank you enough." Damien then looked at the hawk-eyed child and gave him a small smirk. He then began to walk out of the castle and yet came to a stop. A tiny hand grabbed his cloak from behind and tugged at it. Damien turned back and saw the 1-year-old grasping his attire. He then crouched to his eye level and gazed into the piercing hawk-like eyes. "The seas await for someone like you, train hard and look after your parents." The boy nodded a few times. His eyes darted around and then finally asked, "Will you come back?" It was a little odd to see the future strongest swordsman acting like that, but at the end of the day he was but a child. Damien ruffled his jet-black hair. "I'm sure our paths will cross again someday." He then stood up and his towered figure left a shadow over the boy. "That blade is calling out to you, it's a fitting weapon for the future strongest swordsman." The words left a small smile to appear on the child. A sharp glint passed the boy's eyes as he resolutely declared, "I will hold that sword one day, so wait for me." Damien almost froze in his steps but could only respond with a chuckle, "Ra-ha-ha-ha. You've got a nice fire in your eyes, make sure to never let it extinguish." He then waved to the older couple and disappeared into the nightly forest. A short whisper of Vlad echoed in his ears, "Stay prudent, young man." Alongside a goodbye from Mina. A while later, the ship anchored by the edge of the island soon woke up as Damien unfurled the sails. He took out the piece of paper, a Vivre card that began to point in a specific direction, inching forward. Damien soon set the ship in the direction and began to sail. Sabayati Archipelago. It was the last island before the New World. A massive mangrove forest growing out from the middle of the ocean. Since it is only made of wood, it has no magnetic pull to affect a log pose. Sabayati was made up of 79 separate trees known as Yarikaman mangrove. Each tree is called a grove and serves as an island on which people live. Sabayati layout. Grove 1 to 29, the lawless area. Grove 30 to 49, tourism and amusement area. Grove 50 to 59, shipping area. Grove 60 to 69, marine base area. Grove 70 to 79, hotel area. Images of Sabayati, in Discord. The other difference between most islands and this is the fact that you may find certain astronaut-like people walking around. The celestial dragons. They are the aristocratic descendants of 19 of the 20 kings who established what is now known as the world government. They can give any order and it must be followed through. Their words dictate all others around them. They are the law. They can simply point their finger out and demand you to become a slave. What would the world do in front of this absurd and dehumanizing act? They must simply look away as families are ripped apart. What will happen if you try to stand up to them? You will be killed on the spot. Heck, they might even deploy an admiral to escort these nobles. So what are the celestial dragons? They are the gods of this world. Thug. Damien closed the thick book of records that detailed well-known islands of the Grand Line. Gods? I suppose with such rights and authority, it would make just about anyone a god. Though his deep red eyes flashed with determination, I wonder if these gods can bleed. 6 days later. Grove 41, Sabayati Archipelago. It was a pleasant area with a large population, the sounds of kids scrambling about alongside the occasional popping bubbles resounded everywhere. A warm sunlight bathed the grassy land, further enhancing the joyful atmosphere. Image of Grove 41, in Discord. Damn annoying fleas, a young man muttered as he made his way through the crowds of people. The person in question was a little over 10 feet in height with messy black hair and red streaks running down the left side. Damien had met some nuisances along the way to Sabayati. Terrible weather on the first day. Meet a pirate crew looking for a quick sum off his head on the third day. Damien's ship sank at that time so he had to take the pirate's ship. Another random storm on the fourth day. Marine attack on the fifth, looking for the crew he killed. Left the ship broken again from cannon fire in the previous storm. It seemed the stormtrooper aim of the marine ships wasn't as prevalent as shown in the show. Or perhaps the Rocks era had a higher level of marines. Eventually, he made it to Sabayati on the 6th day, hitching a ride on the marine ship and abandoning it at Grove 41. Damien checked the clock on the tower nearby. It's only midday, there's still half a day left till the meet-up time, Damien surmised. His eyes were then drawn to a rather conspicuous poster attached to the wall nearby. Public Employment Security Office monthly postings. It was almost like a flyer for goods, but the name implied something more despicable. I guess the human auctions were around even before Doflamingo's sites, Damien thought as he read over the post. It was essentially written in legal terms, but in layman's terms, it was a poster for a slave auction happening tonight. However, at that very moment, Damien's senses spiked. Whiz! A sharp whistle erupted as a dagger-like object shot at Damien's open neck. Damien didn't even move as the blade hit his skin. Clang! The sound of metal hitting metal broke out as the dagger failed to pierce Damien's hard skin. The red-eyed pirate looked around and surprisingly saw nothing. All he felt was a cold air whistle. Soon his instincts fired one more as the attacker reappeared, this time with a purple coat of energy around their body. Damien raised one finger and shot out a bullet of air. Flying finger pistol. The pocket of air traveled supersonic and into the body of his attacker, and yet it then hit the wall, leaving a deep crater. Logia. Damien narrowed his eyes. You ate quite the rare devil fruit. The figure was caught off guard by the quick reflexes of her prey and chose the quick second of Damien's admiration of their power to disappear. Naturally, it didn't escape Damien's senses as he saw the assassin merge themselves into the shadow of the tree 10 meters behind him, disappearing into its darkness. A few quiet minutes went by until his observation spanned and eventually felt a slight movement, but it was from an odd location, from his own shadow. Suddenly the dark-clothed figure shot up from under Damien's chin with the same daggers aiming at his carotid artery. And yet even at such a distance, the daggers somehow missed and only cleaved the air. The shadowed figure was stumped as its body trembled at the sound of a voice from behind, "Bounty Hunter." The figure turned around but was met with something painful. Crack! Damien's left fist adorned with haki drove into the core of the assassin's chest as the sound of a broken bone echoed through the empty alleyway. A muffled groan followed as the figure was shot into the wall. And yet right before the crash could occur, the figure simply dissolved into the shadows of the wall. However, the clean hit left an odd feeling. Soft chest. Damien murmured as he recalled the sensation. But that would have broken the sternum and punctured a lung at the least. Though I guess bounties aren't just for show, there really are people actively on the hunt for the quick buck, he chuckled. Looks like learning armament haki before leaving Renaissance was a good call. Damien then looked at the poster that was still in his right hand and smiled. Quite the coincidence for this auction to happen on the one day I have free, he muttered. It would be a shame to miss it. To be continued.